The following episode was recorded on February 19th, 2025. In an extremely cruel twist of fate, one of our guests on this episode, Christian Gribneau, died suddenly and unexpectedly just 2 months later on April 20th, Easter Sunday. We dedicate this episode in his honor and memory. Hello, and welcome everybody to our latest episode of Chosen Links. I'm your host, Boaz Hepner, and I very, very much appreciate having you all here. I have a kind of a cool opportunity today. It's the first time I've done an episode quite like this. Rather than gathering a bunch of different influencers to talk about something interesting or something to do with identity politics, this is one that digs in kind of deeply into people who have expertise on a topic of Wikipedia, something that the whole world uses, something that, as far as I know, is pretty much the first result in a search engine when you want to look something up. And love it or hate it, it's something that's in all of our lives and affects all of us. And so there have been and continue to be a whole bunch of amazing men and women around the world who have been trying to analyze just how accurate that data is, just how much deliberate or inadvertent bias there might be. And certainly this has affected people who are pro-Israel like myself, as a lot of the conversation has shifted about Israel in a certain direction within Wikipedia. And it certainly has appeared quite biased to people like myself. The things that I do are also always published in the Jewish Journal, and I'm pointing this out today because I have the pleasure of having a colleague of myself who has worked for years at the Jewish Journal, and that's Aaron Bandler. He's actually the one who, pun intended, has helped bring the band together here. He came to me with this idea a while ago, and I kept seeing the awesome things he was doing with Wikipedia, and he said it would be really cool if we can have an episode where we really get into the thick of it, because there's a lot of shit going down. And I'd really like to show it and talk about it. And I told him if he could help gather the troops, I would be happy to make it happen. And that's why you guys are here today, is because Aaron has been following your work and has been impressed by it and has given me more than an endorsement would be understating it. He's more than endorsed each of you. So I really appreciate that, and I look forward to this conversation, and I hope we can have a serious talk, but also some laughs, even if it's just us laughing through the pain, as we often are. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here today. And for anybody watching, I happen to be recovering from influenza right now. So if Boaz Hepner seems a little bit like a space cadet today, that's because I kind of am. Anyway, let's get started. And I'd like to introduce everybody briefly so we know who they are. And it's going to be done in alphabetical order. So we have, first of all, Shlomit Aharoni Lear. Hello, Shlomit. Dr. Shlomit Aharoni Lear is a researcher and lecturer at the University of Haifa, specializing in gender, culture, and technology. She's published academic papers on Wikipedia and extensively written on the issue of bias against Israel on the platform, including a comprehensive report that addresses the topic in detail, which she presented at the United Nations. So thank you for being here. Boy, we should probably unpack the United Nations in another episode, don't you think? All right, so moving on, we have Aaron Bandler. Aaron has been investigating Wikipedia's anti-Israel left-wing bias for more than 4 years, having talked to several editors to learn about the site works and how it's been co-opted by ideological activists intent on turning Wikipedia into a propaganda arm. Originally from the Bay Area, Aaron's prior work history includes the Daily Wire, Daily Caller, and Town Hall. And as I say, he helped really honestly make this happen today. Yfat Barak-Cheney. Hi, Yfat.
Right.
Yfat is currently Director of International Affairs and Executive Director of the Technology and Human Rights Institute at the World Jewish Congress, WJC. Through her work, Yfat engages with stakeholders such as governments, international organizations, civil society, tech companies on issues of hate speech and anti-Semitism online. Holocaust denial and distortion online, using technology for education, and more. Yfat has extensive experience working in international law. Thank you for being here, Yfat, obviously. Jordan Cope. Jordan is the Director of Policy Education and a staff attorney at StandWithUs, where he helps combat anti-Semitism and boycott against Israel by providing legal and other resources to communities and legislators. Jordan also oversees StandWithUs's campaigns concerning anti-Israel bias at the UN and anti-Semitism in other international legal arenas. Jordan's expertise is on Middle Eastern geopolitics, Qatari soft power, anti-Semitism, and terrorism. Jordan's publications on the Middle East have been featured in numerous media outlets, including Newsweek, the Jerusalem Post, and Harvard's Journal of Middle Eastern Politics and Policy. And Jordan also was on a previous episode of myself with Don Samuels, and it's really cool to have him. So thanks for being here, Jordan.
Thanks for having me back.
Then we have Christian Gribneau. Christian, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it Gribneau?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. We have Christian Gribneau. Christian Gribneau is a seasoned technologist with a robust background in network engineering, systems administration, software development, and architecture. His passions include free speech and digital sovereignty. He sits on the boards of the Justapedia Foundation and Knowledge Standards Foundation, and serves as the volunteer Chief Technology Officer of Justapedia. Thanks for being here, Christian.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Mathilda Heller. Mathilda spelled with an H. I love the spelling. Mathilda is a breaking news reporter and previously the interim diaspora correspondent at the Jerusalem Post. She has a particular interest in diaspora affairs and anti-Semitism. She made Aliyah 5 weeks before October 7th from rural England. She spent 5 months working at the Prime Minister's Office International Desk, helping the Hasbara effort in foreign languages before coming to the Post. In her free time, she is training to be part of the Israel Paralympic tennis team and does martial arts, tutors, and writes. She lives in Tel Aviv and speaks several languages. That is a lot of very cool and varied things. Thanks for being here, Mathilda.
I realized that my bio was a little too long, I think.
I think it's just fine. Don't worry about it. It's very impressive.
Thank you for having me.
I want to hear more about the Paralympics offline. Then we have Ohad Merlin. There's Ohad Merlin, also from JPost. Ohad Merlin is the Middle East Affairs correspondent of the Jerusalem Post, formerly an analyst at the Jerusalem Municipality's East Jerusalem Affairs Unit, and a press and media attaché at the Israeli Embassy in Jordan. He is a graduate of Shalem College in Jerusalem, where he majored in Islam and Middle Eastern studies, and Reichman University, where he earned his master's degree in government, diplomacy, and conflict studies. Thanks for being here with me today, Ohad.
Having me.
For sure. Next, we have David Swindle. David has worked for Zionist nonprofits and publications since 2009. He's edited Jewish writers at PJ Media and the Allgemeiner, worked as director of research for the Israel Group, where he led research into the anti-Israel bias of Wikipedia, done in-depth research into anti-Semitic organizations like CAIR, and engaged in investigative journalism, infiltrating Islamic group conferences. Now he publishes novels, poetry, and nonfiction through his publishing company, God of the Desert Books. He and his fiancée, Sally Schidler, live just outside of Joshua Tree National Park in Yucca Valley, California. Is it Schidler or it's probably Scheidler?
Scheidler, yeah.
Yeah, Scheidler. So apologies to your fiance.
No worries.
Jonathan M. Weiss. Jonathan graduated from Tufts in 2000 and worked for several years in marketing and consulting. For the past 12 years, he's been working as an independent contractor specializing in design and installation of cabinetry, shelving, and storage systems, closets, and entertainment systems in the New York City area. Jonathan started editing Wikipedia in 2005, has since amassed over 600,000 edits, and currently is ranked 42nd all-time in edits on the English language version of Wikipedia. His editing focuses largely on college football. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Next, we have somebody else from Justapedia. Joining Christian Gribneau, we have Betty Wills. Betty is founder and CEO of Justapedia Foundation, a 501c3 educational organization that provides the platform and tools for Justapedia, an English encyclopedia located in Texas. Betty edited Wikipedia for 13 plus years, but after being humiliated, bullied, blocked, and silenced from topics about American politics and anti-fascism as user ATSME, she was inspired to create Justapedia specifically to create an encyclopedia closer to what Larry Sanger envisioned for Wikipedia. Per Betty, that meant restoring the spirit of neutrality and objectivity that Wikipedia has long since lost, and creating a community that was welcoming and helpful to all volunteers. They made lots of changes to purposely differentiate from Wikipedia while maintaining the Wikimedia Foundation's mission of sharing free knowledge. Very cool to have you with us, Betty.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And last but certainly not least, we have David Weissman. David is an expert in the field of online reputation management and digital branding. As such, he's extremely well-versed in the ways of Wikipedia and is the founder of Follow Team Israel, a page that shares the stories of Israeli and Jewish sports to the world. I think David and Mathilda should probably speak. Maybe he can start covering some Paralympics after this.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you for having me.
absolutely. So you are certainly a damn impressive bunch, and I am very happy to have you here. So I'm going to actually get this started in an interesting way. Rather than ask a question, I thought you'd all be interested in something that happened behind the scenes. When I told my viewers / listeners about what we were going to be doing today, I actually was copied an interesting letter that somebody sent. So Wikipedia, as you might know, would send people fundraising efforts every now and then, right? Send us some money, support our efforts. Well, somebody told me, actually, can I send you the letter I sent them and the letter they sent back? And I'm going to go ahead without further ado and let you know that. And for kindness and legal reasons, I will leave out the person who responds name. And we're going to take it from here and see what you think. This is from Alyssa Brooks. Hi, I've donated to Wikipedia every year on at least one of my email accounts. I so appreciated the work that Wiki did to make knowledge accessible and free. This year, Wikipedia has turned off their values of neutrality and truth, instead opting to publish information that is just short of blood libel, furthering the damage to the Jewish community that has seen at least a 300% increase in hate crimes globally this year. If you would like a detailed report on what I'm talking about, you can read all about it in this article, and then she includes an article with Tablet Mag about Wikipedia being a Jewish problem. I will not be donating to Wikipedia this year or ever again unless these issues are addressed, and I will be encouraging everyone I know to withhold their donations as well. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Alyssa Brooks. Now, she did get a response. I'm going to withhold the name of the Wikipedia person who responded, but this was the response. Hello, Alyssa. Thank you for your email. The Wikimedia Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to enable people around the world to collect and develop educational content under a free license or in the public domain, and to disseminate it effectively and globally. The foundation does not endorse political candidates or have any agenda other than our mission. The idea of a neutral point of view is one of our core principles. Wikipedia is a global project managed by tens of thousands of volunteers from around the world. Many people do not know this, but the Wikimedia Foundation does not control or edit the content of Wikipedia. We are here primarily to provide infrastructure and support the volunteer community. They are people from virtually all walks of life who edit and contribute every day. They reflect a vast number of viewpoints. There is no central editorial board. All edits are made by individual members of the Wikipedia community. The volunteer editors appreciate hearing viewpoints about content and value input from readers that can help improve the quality of information. If you have specific corrections or facts to offer, volunteers require citations or facts from reliable, high-quality sources to review and improve the information. You can learn more about how misinformation is addressed on Wikipedia in this 1-minute video. And then she goes on, blah, blah, blah. The volunteers are strongly focused on the editorial values of non-censorship, neutrality, verifiability, and what is termed no original research. All volunteers invested in the quality of Wikipedia are working collectively to build balanced, neutral articles that reflect a variety of perspectives on often complex, high-profile topics. Content and information can change quickly to reflect worldviews. Clicking on the View History tab of an article will display the edited history and associated comments. For controversial or contested articles, clicking on the talk page can often provide more context how it was created and will show any debates among the editors. Thanks again for reaching out to share your views. And this is somebody who, the title was Senior Manager of Donor Relations in Wikimedia Foundation. And you know what? I know it was a little bit long-winded, but I thought that was a kind of a cool way to get started. Let's start with Wikipedia's statement to somebody who's upset by what's going on. That's what she said. How do you guys feel about that response from Wikipedia? Is there validity to it? Is it bullshit? Go ahead. Who
Well,
would like to...
it's very predictable, very much kind of like the corporate, like legalistic response you'd expect from, like, say, university. When they reach out to them for comment about something controversial, which is what I've done so many times over the years. Of course, Wikimedia Foundation responded that way. I mean, we saw this with the ADL last year. After they got downgraded, they and a bunch of other Jewish groups sent a letter to Wikimedia Foundation saying, please overturn this. The Wikimedia Foundation basically told them to kick rocks because the Wikimedia Foundation, they really don't control what goes on Wikipedia. They just fund it and keep it operational. And they always just say, we respect the consensus. And they will never overturn it. And so consensus, Wikipedia revolves around consensus. That's the process. It's basically a combination of numbers and the strength of the argument as it pertains to site policy. And in the past year, we've seen, at least in regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict, the numbers skew as high as like 3-1 in favor of the anti-Israel editors. And numerically speaking, consensus is usually defined as a supermajority, usually around 2/3, depending on who you talk to. So when you have numbers like 3-1, I mean, you're just not going to win those types of discussions. And so that's why we've seen in the past year Wikipedia defining Zionism as colonization, titling an article Gaza genocide, and then adding Gaza genocide to a list of genocides article, and so on and so forth. And so there were recently 6 anti-Israel editors topic banned from the Israel-Palestine topic area, as well as 2 pro-Israel editors. So the landscape has changed in that regard. It's too early to say whether or not it's going to, like, really change things in the long run. There are some editors I've talked to who say that at this point it doesn't matter, the damage is done. Because the thing is that the content that I mentioned, like Zionism as colonization, Gaza genocide, that title, that's not a status quo content. And when no consensus is reached on a particular topic, the status quo content remains. And so until basically Wikipedia can't work unless it has editors that are truly maintained to upholding its site's principles. And right now, that's just unfortunately not the case.
Okay, so Jonathan Weiss, you are a Wikipedia editor. You still actively doing this, or is this in the past for you?
Yes, no, I'm still active editor, and as you mentioned in the intro, most of what I do pertains to college football and other related sports. But I have dabbled a little bit in political stuff, largely stuff in not so much Israel, but in the context of American politics. And what Aaron was saying, I think what happened with Israel is a symptom of a larger political reality on Wikipedia, in that there's a strong kind of leftist bias that pervades anything that's political, and that happens in terms of the decisions that are made on individual articles, and also what sources are deemed reliable. For the Western left, Israel, Jews and Israelis track toward, they're sort of defined by them as simply kind of white Western, colonialists, and therefore they kind of become the enemy or the enemy or oppressor. So, so that paradigm kind of makes Israel look very bad.
Now, when you have Jordan, you're about to speak, and I'm going to call on you next. But my basic question, even if it's rhetorical, is, this senior representative who wrote that potentially boilerplate thing, she's saying there's tons and tons and tons of people there. How could there essentially be any political bias? Because clearly these editors are going to be probably statistically about half on the right and half on the left. So they're just putting the information out there. Do they actually have a different hiring or volunteer process that's not getting even anything close to a fair consensus of the political left and right? Is there no actual balance happening there in terms of who the people are?
So I feel I just have to respond after Jonathan being a college football fan, because I actually walked on as a field goal kicker in college. I didn't make it, but it was a fun
Wow.
experience nonetheless.
What school?
University of Texas. So I
Oh,
played a lot
really?
of soccer, and I tried transitioning into field goal kicking. Back in the
Okay.
day, I could hit over 50 yards just slightly. But
Oh, wow. Okay.
I guess
Nice.
now to talk about Wikipedia bias and to try to keep all matters on the goalpost now and not to shift them like Wikipedia does. If we're going to talk about bias and damage inflicted, Wikipedia has roughly 4 billion users every month who come to their webpage. And of course, during the October 7th war, at peak season, the year and the several months before Wikipedia really decided to clean up some of their editing team, that's when the damage was done. There was so much bias, institutional bias, I would argue, as an Arabic speaker and as somebody who conducts searches every now on the Arabic page, you would find effectively a pop-up that would have to be closed, if I recall properly, that would effectively accuse Israel of committing genocide and advocate for a ceasefire. I'm sure Ohad perhaps can further expound on that as another Arabic speaker on this call. But of course, another strategy of Wikipedia was to bury the devil in the details. If you look at traditional terrorist organizations as designated by the United States, such as ISIS, such as FARC, such as the PKK, such as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, just Al-Qaeda, it usually takes 1 to 2 paragraphs before Wikipedia explains its nature as a terrorist organization or its status thereof. When it came to Hamas and Hezbollah, I believe it took for Hamas about 4 paragraphs, and for Hezbollah somewhere perhaps in the 30s. And the average reader who comes to these entry pages probably is only going to spend approximately 5 to 6 seconds reading the page. I think Forbes had an article noting that that's usually how long people spend reading a web page in general. And so when you ask yourself why it took 20 paragraphs or so for Wikipedia to even mention the word terrorist when it came to Ismail Haniyeh or Hassan Nasrallah when it comes to Hezbollah, we also need to think about the disparities between the English pages, which are already biased, and then the Arabic pages, which when it came to Ismail Haniyeh, if I recall properly, Wikipedia didn't even mention his terrorist nature at all. And so Wikipedia caused tons of damage, unimaginable damage to a huge audience of people, perhaps on the greatest reference page in terms of popularity in history.
I totally agree with that. And I would just like to add that actually Hamas and Hezbollah are not defined as terror organization on Wikipedia. They are defined as militant groups. And this description repeats itself again and again. So even if you go to the Bibis family page and the story of their abduction, which is relatively neutral in terms of really one of the few pages which really, tells the story and is not extremely biased in like trying to wiki watch what's happening and use it as a propaganda page. But the fact that Hamas and other militant groups are other terror groups are not described as they are terror groups who kidnap kids, who kidnap babies, who slaughters people, then in a way, I would like to say that Wikipedia and the Wikipedia Foundation is complicit with the atrocities, with these horrible, horrible crimes. And the fact that they are an encyclopedia that doesn't call the truth and doesn't say the basic thing that these are terror organizations, then it really allows it and actually uses Wikipedia, very much like Jonathan has been saying, as a way to brainwash people and manipulate them because of the immense effect Wikipedia has. So when we go to Wikipedia, we are not reading an X page. We are not reading Facebook. We are reading a place which bases itself on the notion of neutrality. And when we are receiving knowledge framed in a certain way and biased to the extent of not calling a terror organization, of refusing to state the simple fact that Jerusalem is part of Israel, and many, many, many more facts, then we have to look at Wikipedia as a propaganda tool and as complicit with terror organization, a proxy, at least when it comes to political articles related to Israel, related to other groups. And we have to say that, as difficult as it is to hear. And I have to say that personally, I've been editing Wikipedia for more than 10 years. It's a beautiful, beautiful project, but we have to admit that it is a project that has gone very bad, and there's a great need of intervention.
Would you say, based on what you're saying right now, you know what rings to me as familiar when you're the way you're describing it is the same way I would describe Al Jazeera. Would you kind of compare Wikipedia as a source of information similarly to Al Jazeera, which most people in the Western world sort of realize is basically a Qatari and Hamas spokespiece?
It's much worse. It's much worse, because when I listen or look or watch Al Jazeera, I realize it's Qatar paid. I realize it is, I realize that it is, I expect the bias. But when I go to Wikipedia, and this is one of the first sources many of us go to around the world, this is like in Google, Google also participate with it, and AI participate in this, making it a very popular website. Then I don't expect to meet Al Jazeera. I don't expect to meet Al Jazeera, and yet I do.
So it's comparable, but it's more nefarious because it's more subtle, because it's behind the scenes and you don't see it coming. You expect it to be just a dictionary entry and not to be a news source. That's interesting.
But let me, I've got to say this. It's an onion. You've got to peel the layers. If you go to perennial sources, you see exactly why it's a biased encyclopedia. They pick what sources you can use, what you can cite. And they pick, I think there's probably a lot of journalists, because they get clicks from Wikipedia.
What do you mean by perennial sources? Can you define what you just meant by that?
It's WP : RSP, I think it is.
But what are they?
The consensus chooses what sources you can use.
Yeah. So I maybe I'll jump in here. So really any source out there is subject to debate. What Betty was talking about, there's a web page called like an administrative page on Wikipedia called Perennial Sources, which is basically a table talking about much discussed sources and kind of quickly highlighting the past consensus about them. So you can go there and look, and there's probably like, I don't know, 100, 200 sources there, kind of green. They're all evaluated as green light. You can kind of use them for all purposes. Maybe a yellow light with some caution, or red basically can't be used at all.
Yeah, no conservative sources are in there. They eliminate the sources that would balance an article.
You're not even conservative sources that are prestigious, such as the Wall Street
No,
Journal?
I mean Fox News.
The Wall Street Journal is allowed, but there's a lot of other sources that aren't.
Fox News.
Like you can't use the Fox News for anything really, or the Post, New York Post. So
I just saw there's an entire discussion revolving around the Jerusalem Post. If it's supposed to be considered as a trustworthy source, which again shows exactly what you were talking about. I wanted to jump on what Jordan said about the way Arabic Wikipedia works, because we were talking about sources, but Arabic Wikipedia somehow doesn't believe you need any sources. You read things that are insanely either misinformation or not information at all. Things that are sometimes very subtle and sometimes very, very out there. So I'll give you an example. The very first sentence of the entry about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion reads, "The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a leaked document whose authenticity is disputed between those who believe it's authentic and those who believe it's fake. So right there in the first sentence, you have this underlying tone of, this is actually leaked and it might not be a forged document. You have entries about, you have an entire entry called the Israeli propaganda during Operation Tufan al-Aqsa, which is the name of the October 7th massacre, which claims that Shani Luke is still alive and that there was no sexual infringements during the massacre, which again, no sources, or Hamas sources, which for them are okay. You also have, this is an amazing quote. There was, in the 1960s, 1969, there was an attempt to set fire in Al-Aqsa by a Christian Australian tourist. His name was Dennis Rohan. And in some pages, it says that he was Jewish, which he wasn't. In other pages, it says that he was Zionist, okay. But then they attribute this quote to Golda Meir, which she never said, okay. They say she said, "I didn't sleep that night when I imagined the Arabs entering Israel. And when the morning came and nothing happened, I realized we can do whatever we want because this is a dormant nation." Now, she didn't say that, which is why the editor goes back and says, despite the doubts about the authenticity of this quote, its realism far outweighs the importance of whether it was a true quote or not. Because even if Meir didn't say it, the event spoke clearly. And again, this is not even trying to hide the fact that you're making up quotes. And this is there on Wikipedia. I'm not making this up. I took a screenshot. I translated it. And this is insane. The level of I don't even have the word to say of
it's audacious. It's audacious.
Yes, audacity. Thank you for that. Yeah, and this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about Wikipedia Arabic, which 400 million people speak Arabic, and even more speak it as a second language. And again, it's misinformation. It's completely distorted, and this is what we're up against in other parts of the world.
Basically, they peddle proudly in what Stephen Colbert, I believe, coined as truthiness years ago. I mean, it's truthiness, right? That's all that really matters. It doesn't matter if it happened. It matters is that the spirit of it seems to be what we want it to have, to what we want to tell as a story. So it becomes our new narrative.
Buzz.
Yeah.
I want to say something that kind of relates to where you started the conversation, because I find it really funny that the way to actually get a response from Wikimedia is by going through their donor relations, right? That is the longest response I've read from Wikimedia ever. And we've been in contact with them from before October 7th on issues actually related to Holocaust distortion across Wikipedia, right? And that literally is the longest thing I've ever seen in response for the donors. So maybe that's where we'll go next. But it was very much in the sense of like who Wikimedia claims to be and who Wikipedia is, right? Because we can say Wikipedia is, but Wikipedia is just people, right? And Wikimedia has a sense of saying, not us, we only put the system there. We believe in the system of people will edit whatever based on neutral sources. You don't, like, that's the letter, right? You don't understand our system. And the system has to work without recognizing that the system is so easily, biased and so easily manipulated, because some of the researchers here have presented, right, in research about Wikipedia, how 2 free editors will go in and change whatever they want based on whatever sources they want. And it's changed on Wikipedia. And then you can start arguing with it and stuff, but that's just so easy to manipulate. Even, Ohad, you just mentioned a term, right? What's a term on Wikipedia? On a normal encyclopedia, would like the Israeli propaganda on like Al-Aqsa Flood Day, is that an encyclopedic term? No, that's something that is obviously a propaganda term, an attempt to claim a narrative. That's not information, which is what Wikimedia say they are, right? We're like the biggest source of knowledge in the world. They stopped using information, I think, right? They switched to knowledge because they realized it's not just info. So the whole system is just easily maneuvered. It's a super easy, I think Aaron mentioned, numbers game, right? Like you're never going to be the same numbers that other sides have. And also pointing to what Jonathan mentioned, I don't even think it's a left issue, right? And part of the problem, we don't know who the editors are. You don't even know who they are in the sense of, Are they left? I think a lot of them are actually not Western and not Western left. A lot of them come from Arabic-speaking countries. We see that in some of the edits that they do. And we've seen these editing wars and editing issues also on issues, as I said, before October 7th, we approached a lot related to Holocaust issues. And there it was reframing Holocaust programs, etc., in Eastern European countries, definitely not coming from left wings, but just using the system to change the entire narratives of conversations about Israel, about Jewish people, about Jewish communities. So it's the broader picture in the Wikimedia hands off. We have nothing to do with this is really, really unacceptable.
It's bullshit. It's more than unacceptable. It's bullshit. And let's take a few steps backwards now. You guys all have a knowledge base that 99% of people watching are not going to have. You all understand Wikipedia in a certain, about 10 degrees more deeper. Let's take some steps back. Maybe ask Betty, who probably I'm assuming that of everybody on here, Betty is probably the longest ago history with Wikipedia. Started earliest on. She's friends with Larry, who is one of the co-founders. So I want to ask Betty, and if anybody else also knows, take me back. When did Wikipedia start, and when did it go from this to this?
I saw
go ahead,
transition on, well, Jonathan's been there much longer than I have, but I saw the transition in 2016. That's when Trump, I mean, it just went crazy. It got so bad. I was just in shock. They created, one editor created that perennial sources site. And it's pathetic. Context is supposed to matter. They don't care. This is all a plot. I think this is all behind the scenes, a concerted effort to use it as a political weapon.
So did this actually start in 2016 until 2015?
Yeah, that's when I saw it.
So I'm asking you guys as a consensus. And through 2015, do you guys all just think collectively, oh, it was a pretty neutral site? Is that what
I don't think it happened all at once, but yeah, I mean, it's probably gotten, well, the one thing I would say, so I've been editing since 2005. And the good thing about Wikipedia, I think, is that the overall comprehensiveness and quality of the average article has improved a lot. Much better sourcing. There was a lot of just kind of apolitical just junk on there, say 10 or 15 years ago, and that's gotten cleaned up to a good degree. But the downside of that is that where there is political bias, it's become more entrenched in sort of well-sourced, well-constructed content. So I don't know. I kind of think about what's happened broadly in the United States and the West. I think there's been several inflection points where there's been like kind of an uptick in, if you will, kind of leftist activism. And certainly Trump's election in 2016 is one of them. I would say, you can go back a couple of years with Ferguson, and then there was that war that summer between Gaza and Israel. That I think that was an inflection point, and then you had 16, and then certainly everything that happened in 2020 between COVID and George Floyd was a third huge inflection point. So I think you could probably track what's happened on Wikipedia to that as well. So
okay, David, go ahead.
I first did some research and writing about Wikipedia back in 2011 when I was an editor at Front Page Magazine, and the bias, from more being on the left side of things, being against people on the right, that was very clear back in at least 2011. So I think this problem of bias goes back pretty far, but the people haven't been watching it. There hasn't been as concerted an effort to investigate Wikipedia, to see the anti-Israel bias. From the end of 2018 through summer 2021, I was working with Jack Salzberg and his group, the Israel Group. I was spending 20 hours a week on Wikipedia. And it was really hard for Jack and I just to try and wake people up about the problem. He spent so many times and Jack died in 2021. He was my mentor. really kind of the reason why I'm a Zionist activist today. And he was perpetually trying to wake people up to this problem. And it's only been the last couple of years when I've started seeing it more talked about in Jewish media and among pro-Israel people. It was just such a niche issue for many years. And now it's so obvious, after October 7th, but it's been going on for a long time.
So I would like to address this issue as well. And I agree with David that we can see an amazing change from before October 7 and right after it. So if we compare a lot of articles, we can see, there's almost not a single article that haven't changed and haven't blackfaced Israel since October 7. So the first thing that you look at it and you see the immense work that have been done and how many edits to various pages, big pages like Zionism and Israel, and relatively smaller pages like pages of Kiryat, pages of places like Sderot and like Golan Heights, etc. All these pages have been touched, and they were touched by a certain group, mostly by a certain group of editors. So when you first look at it, you say, okay, it's because of the war, at least when it comes to Israeli-Palestinian relations, that all these articles have gone so biased against Israel. But when you look at the people who are very busy editing these pages, you realize that it started long before that, because these people have been editing Wikipedia for 15 years, and they have thousands and thousands of edits. And when you look at the time these editors spend on Wikipedia, you notice it's almost like their job, they spend 9 hours shifts on Wikipedia. So I don't know if they are paid or not paid. I don't know who is maybe paying them, but it is very much, there's great suspicion that this is like a calculated move that really has been going on for years. And now when the war started a year and a half ago, then these people really started to make great changes. So the idea that anyone can now come and correct this, it's totally, it's not really true, because it's very difficult to now edit Wikipedia. I cannot go to the Zionist extremely biased page and edit it, not because I don't have 500 edit and 30 days of experience, but because anyone who now touches it after it reached consensus is being accused of being biased and having a non-neutral point of view. So this is really that Wikipedia has been hijacked by people who've been editing it for many years and who are now in a position of power. They are well known within the community. They have a say. They are the ones that are behind some of the most questionable decisions, like the decision to treat Al Jazeera as a reliable source, to treat ADL as an unreliable source, and to block all pages related to the conflict from new editors. So they are really pulling the strings because of their seniority on the platform.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
Well, and I would say that as far as when Wikipedia became biased, I've talked to some editors who just say it was always biased, but it definitely has become pronounced over the past few years, and I think in the past year especially in regards to Israel Palestine. So I think a good example would be there was an article that was called Israel and Apartheid, or Israel and the Apartheid Analogy, for many years, where it would just club you over the head with a bunch of allegations of Israel being an apartheid state. And so that's what the bias was back then. Now that article is actually called Israeli Apartheid, and it treats it treats the notion that Israel is an apartheid state as a neutral fact, which of course it's not. In my opinion, it's a blood libel. But regardless of my opinion, it's clearly a disputed it's subject of dispute. And Wikipedia, as the neutral point of view policy states, like it's supposed to describe disputes, not engage in them. But clearly, like they have done that here by taking a side, and that happened because only a handful of anti-Israel editors just kind of like made the change kind of under the radar. It happened when there was a discussion to try and change a Wikipedia article is called Allegations of Genocide in the Ongoing Gaza War to Gaza Genocide. They did this discussion to change it to Israeli apartheid. Well, everyone's attention was diverted toward the article that eventually became Gaza Genocide. And so that's kind of the nefarious way in which these editors operate. And to Shlomit's point about how these editors obsessively edit about Israel, there's that viral Pirate Wires piece by Ashley Rensburg, who I know and does a great job on this stuff. Like he documented how these editors just like he shows the statistics showing like how they just spend all their time editing about Israel, and that was a major point of discussion in the most recent case before the Arbitration Committee, or ARBCOM, that's Wikipedia's Supreme Court. And that's kind of why the topic bans kind of went the way that they did. As far as American politics go, I think it tracks that things got a lot worse after Trump was elected. But I've also read stuff about how like in 2012 there was a whole Wikipedia article dedicated to Mitt Romney's dog. Remember when that was a controversy? So I think all I have to say is that Wikipedia has always been biased, but it's definitely become a lot worse and more pronounced over the past few years and the past year especially.
Oh, yeah. Jordan, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I've heard this analogy thrown around that Wikipedia might be a little bit more dangerous than Al Jazeera, and I would beg to differ just slightly because Al Jazeera is often cited by the international community in human rights reports, and I put human rights in quotation marks given their affiliations with terrorist groups and their biases in and of themselves. But I definitely think many Americans frequently peruse through AJ Plus, unbeknownst to them that AJ Plus, however progressive it may seem, is actually an outlet sponsored by Al Jazeera and part of the Al Jazeera greater network. We were also talking about disputed territories and how Wikipedia fails to address them in an objectively fair manner and under a fair standard. And I think one of the most disgusting things recently that I read on Wikipedia was when I read about the Mazdel Shams massacre, a rocket attack from Hezbollah that killed approximately 12 children playing soccer in northern Israel, Golan Heights area. And Wikipedia took it to itself to describe the victims of the attack as Syrian children. I mean, in an era where we're constantly being told that it's inappropriate to define for another person what their identity is, Wikipedia took it upon themselves to basically erase their Israeli identity, and more so to erase the concept of Israeli suffering in this conflict. And I think that was one of the most pertinent examples of bias from Wikipedia, in the sense that they wanted to remove any aspect that Israelis could also suffer in this war, let alone to denigrate the memory of those who were killed. 61% of Druze in Israel, who were the predominant victims of this attack, 61% of Israeli Druze, according to some polls, suggested that they felt extremely Israeli. Why deny them of their Israeli identity? And that's a common theme in Wikipedia. So very, very problematic, but just my 2 cents, I guess, on how Wikipedia overcharacterizes on occasion.
Mathilda, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I was just going to say something. So I think adding to that kind of connected is the fact that the way that Wikipedia uses language is really interesting, because it's often presented in a kind of this is information. But if you look at the language itself, it's often quite inflammatory or emotive in times that it shouldn't be, or the way that the sentences are paired next to each other is designed to create a certain impression. I was looking earlier at the Wikipedia page on the Second Intifada, and one sentence really struck me. I'll just read it, which was, it was during the Second Intifada, and then it says, Israeli security forces engaged in gunfights, targeted killings, tank attacks, and airstrikes, semicolon, Palestinians engaged in gunfights, stone throwing, and rocket attacks. And I just thought it was really interesting how they paired the way the targeted killings was next to the sort of stone throwing, as if there was somehow a lesser threat from the Palestinian side as to the Israeli side during the Second Intifada. Even though it's not stated explicitly, it does guide a viewer subconsciously to a certain conclusion. And likewise, talking about the West Bank, one of the quotes they have on the page about Palestine and Israel, it's in both. The international community maintains that Israel does not have sovereignty in the West Bank and considers Israel's control of the area to be the longest military occupation in modern history. Stated like a blanket fact, not cited, and also not stating which international communities they're speaking about, or showing the difference in perspectives. So I think the way that they use language, while presented as a kind of, this is information, is often emotive and you have to read behind the lines, but that doesn't mean that everyone does do that. So there's an issue with the way that they use their own, well, there's an issue with the way that the language is written on their article pages.
So they're going behind.
I just want to say something on what, just on how Jordan and Mathilda are presenting things. I think that's part of the issue. There's no such thing as Wikipedia is, right? It's not a body. It's not a body that you can address. It's not something that has an organization where people actually edit, people who care about this are editing. And that's part of the issue, right? Wikipedia are people's entries about things they care about. Right, Jonathan, you care about college football?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
And Wikimedia is supposed to be the body, but they're like taking out everything, including the arbitration, everything. There's people, volunteers who care about issues and will present whatever they want. They are supposedly abiding by the neutral point of view. Erin mentioned that, which is like Wikipedia's value, or Wikimedia's value for Wikipedia. But Wikipedia is not an organization. It's not a company that you can go and address and say, hey, your editors who you pay are not doing their job correctly. So it's basically, instead of calling it an encyclopedia or knowledge base, we call it like, an outlet for people's opinions. The problem is that all of us, and including technology companies and people, are addressing it as a very neutral, informational, knowledge base. And part of what we need to do is change that conversation and stop saying Wikipedia is encyclopedia and start saying, it's kind of like a blog of people.
I completely agree, and it isn't. It's all the different editors, and all of it is like more of a conglomerate, I suppose, if you think of it like that. But that's coming from the perspective of knowing that there are editors involved in revision and in like editing wars, all that goes on behind the scenes. But for the majority of people, Wikipedia is Wikipedia. And so while we're having a discussion about what goes on behind the scenes, when saying Wikipedia is, I'm referring to most people read Wikipedia as a source of information above other sources of information. And most people don't go on a page in Wikipedia and look at the view history and the talk history and the editing history. So it's taken more at face value. So while obviously I understand and I agree that there's more that goes on behind the scenes and it's not a set body as such, that we're coming from a different place than a lot of people gaining information from Wikipedia will be coming from.
I'd like to add to Mathilda's words that there are also very subtle things that those editors do in order to win this narrative war. So, for instance, I don't know if it's still this way, but if you go into Eden Golan, the Israeli representative to the Eurovision last year, you'll see her name written in both Hebrew and Russian, even though she was born in Israel. But it's like a way of telling people that the Israeli representative to Eurovision is not Israeli, or is not. It also has a name written in a different language. And there's also, I don't remember which one it was, but I once went into an article about one of the towns in Israel, and I saw that right under the name of the town, it had a map of made by this Palestinian historian that says that shows what villages were on the same or in the area of this village. And already in the graphic version, in the graphic first part, that's the first thing that people see. It already tells you the story that you have to know as a viewer of Wikipedia, that no, this is stolen land, and this settlement isn't really supposed to exist. And that's a really little small things that those editors do in order to just put that narrative feed that narrative into anyone who goes into these pages.
I would like to add something before we get too far carried away. And going back to Yfat's point, it's one that's well taken. I'm thinking in a bit of a legal sense here, in that corporate entities or other entities, when they engage in some sort of illegal practice, can indeed be held liable as a single entity. And even though Wikipedia itself might be composed of many different editors and volunteers and whatnot, at the end of the day, it is still a single entity at the same time. And though it is not illegal to advance free speech, however incorrect it might be, unless it crosses into the lines of defamation or slander, which is not what I'm alleging here. But long story short, if Wikipedia ultimately does allow for a lot of this material to stay up on its pages, and it still has guidelines to be fair and impartial or objective or whatever, that at the end of the day could constitute a tacit endorsement, especially when it's such a hot topic theme, which is at the forefront of the world's attention on all the front pages of all the major tabloids for about a year and a half. So I would argue that Wikipedia is, and it isn't at the same time, a single entity. But for all intents and purposes, its tacit endorsements by allowing this material to remain on its pages, its entry pages, would certainly, in my opinion, constitute some sort of agenda that they are promoting.
Well, they've been sued a lot of times, and they've won everything pretty much. Because when you go to edit there, you have to go and edit under their terms of use, and they hold the writers responsible. And in fact, they go after them. And Heritage Foundation is now targeting Wikipedia editors because they know they can't sue the foundation. They're not going to win that battle. So what I'm reading now, they've outlined plans to identify and target Wikipedia volunteer editors accused of spreading anti-Semitic content, according to documents obtained by the Forward publication. Their strategy includes using facial recognition and a database of hacked credentials to unmask editors who operate under pseudonyms. The exact nature of the anti-Semitism they aim to combat remains unspecified, but recent changes on Wikipedia concerning Israel, Gaza, and related issues have drawn criticism from Jewish groups. In a pitch to potential donors for Project Esther, their initiative against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, Heritage proposed creating fake user accounts to deceive editors into revealing personal information.
Well, I think that's a very, very important point, and it does occur right now, not only in relation to Israel, but also to India. There's a lot of conflict about India. India has taken Wikipedia to court, and and the foundation had to give some of the names or the IP addresses of 2 users who used Wikipedia as to spread misinformation. And actually, the foundation also paid for the lawyers. It's very, very interesting. And the legal aspect of it is very important. But I want to talk about something else. Can we allow knowledge to be written by people who are not identified? If we're talking about knowledge, about math, about nature, about medicine, okay, there are differences in views, but this is okay. But when we talk about sensitive topics, about ongoing topics, I think there is a big problem by the fact that people who write knowledge are masked, and we don't know who they are. So this anonymity, first, it allows the gender gap within Wikipedia. And we haven't talked about the gender gap, which is like enormous, not only in the minority of women editing, but also in the minority of biographies about women. So the whole concept of the wisdom of the crowd is really not manifested on Wikipedia because there's not diversity. It's mainly men, and mainly white men, and it's not diverse at all. So that begins a problem. But the bigger problem is really the bias itself. And how can we fight this bias? And I think one of the main things that we have to demand Wikimedia to change, and I think we can demand that. And I don't think that they can stay behind their innocent speeches that they answer donors that are saying we're stopping our donation. Because after all, they are really doing here something which is really horrendous. Spreading hate around the world, spreading misinformation, and they have to be accountable for that. So I think one of the first demands is really accountability of editors, and really making editors who write about sensitive topics to be nominalized. I mean, to write under the real name and not under pseudonyms, because the current situation is somebody from the Ku Klux Klan can write about Afro-Americans. And that is exactly what's happening. There are some articles related to Jewish heritage, Solomon Temple, for example. And then there's one guy, Iskandar, who is non-Palestinian guy, who goes and edits it and deletes pages of Jewish heritage. And this is exactly what's happening within the takeover that Wikipedia undergoes as time goes by. And I think this must be addressed.
Go ahead, Mathilda.
So I agree that the lack of accountability is a challenge, because how do you hold people responsible, or at least identify people spreading misinformation if you don't know who they are? I also understand the flip side of that, which is anonymity for editors provides a certain safety in a good capacity and in a bad capacity, in that, say, for example, you have Jewish editors of a page on Judaism saying things about Judaism that people don't like. By identifying themselves, they're opening themselves up to potential abuse, trolling, all those kind of things. So while the accountability is important, I think there's also the dangers of people being named, even in contentious topics such as what we're discussing. Because while for the people who are spreading misinformation, that's a good thing, it means accountability for the rest of us. On the other hand, it could open other people up who are editing important information to like hate of some kind.
Yeah, but you know, the whole thing is they've got a monopoly. That's what has to be addressed. I mean, all this other stuff, there's nothing illegal about what they're doing. If it was legal, they'd been shut down a long time ago. Well, what's happening, and what Texas, I think, Ted Cruz has done, is filed antitrust lawsuit against Google. Google's a big part to blame here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and the sources, Google and Wikipedia, have a monopoly. They're all working together.
Exactly. And while you cannot sue Wikipedia, you can definitely sue Google for spreading this misinformation, because Google allows it and Google is complicit in it, and Google is suable. So one place to start is really having Google stop sharing information, sensitive information on Wikipedia. And also we must protect ourselves as AI are using Wikipedia. I mean, the world is in danger. And this is not exaggeration at all. This is a tool we're talking about the protocols of Zion, the elderly of Zion. This is million times more serious than that. It is exactly that. This is an effort to poison the mind of millions around the world and not allow them to think for themselves. Because it's okay that people will think differently. It's okay that people will have different opinion. Not everybody has to be pro-Zionist, that's for sure. But once we have the main source of information online so poisonous, so biased, then this is really hurts the democratic principle. And this is a very, very serious thing.
Okay,
Very
before I get to the question, I want to be able to get to David and Aaron, who are both waiting. Go ahead, David, and then Aaron.
I want to throw out an idea here that to maybe stir up some discussion, because it seems like, we're probably mostly agreeing. The conclusion that I came to after 2 years of dealing with this garbage, there is no solution. There is no way of going in and fixing all of this bias. I've cut across this, looked at all sorts of different ways. Jack and I considered what sort of lawsuit, legal ways could you go in. At one point, when Jack and I were kind of coming to the end, he was wanting to do this sorts of stuff that Heritage Foundation is talking about, of like be a little spy agency and go into Wikipedia and pretend to be this. And oh man, I spent so much time doing this thing of let's find out who these people actually are. Let's unmask them. And then that will dissuade them from their editing. So much time spent tracking down this person and looking at this framing of their name and stuff. And these problems that we're seeing are endemic to how Wikipedia has been set up, to the rules that go back at the very beginning, which are tremendously naive in not understanding human nature and not understanding that an encyclopedia about medical stuff or math, that's one thing. An encyclopedia about current events that's being updated regularly, that encyclopedias weren't planned to be that way. And also the big picture point that I want to make, Wikipedia is simply an expression of the broader global media. It's all based on sources from reliable sources, New York Times, BBC, Reuters, whoever. And so what we're seeing in terms of anti-Israel bias on Wikipedia, that's the anti-Israel bias in world media writ large. So we can't just fix Wikipedia when Wikipedia is taking from all these other places. And it's garbage in, garbage out. So we can't fix the global media. We can't go in and get them to change the central thing. This is it. We're stuck with this.
You have alternatives. See, that's the whole thing with the monopoly. We have, that's exactly what Justapedia is doing. We've got on our front page the Wikipedia article versus the Justapedia article. It's the same topic. And you can see the stark differences in what neutrality looks like and what Wikipedia is doing. The problem is Google, even the AIs, as someone just said, are all trained on Wikipedia stuff. Now, we've started getting some of the AI, Christian can tell us about that, but all you have to do is get Google out of the picture, and eventually enough alternatives will come in and neutralize it. That's the only way.
No,
we just have to get
Wikipedia has too much of a head start. It's too late. They've been around 20 years. Google's not going to change how it's featured. I don't see.
It's going to change, because I'll tell you, here's what they're doing with antitrust. Okay. They've got Wikipedia up there. They've got what's called Wikidata. In Wikidata, they've got Justapedia in there. I went in to put my registered trademark on it in the Wikidata, and I noticed that they have us listed as a mirror or fork of Wikipedia. Okay. So the minute the search engines go out, they see mirror or fork, they exclude it, period. Now, Jimmy says, yeah, well, you are a fork of Wikipedia. I said, well, no, we're changing. We have our own articles. We've got new articles, yada, yada. All right. So Google, let's use this comparison. Amazon Books, all of the different bookstores have the same book. When you search for that book title, what does Google bring up? All the different marketplaces that have the book, right? So if I have the same article, why am I excluded?
Because you don't have as many links to you as Wikipedia does. That's, the basic of Google is however many links are linking to
because
something.
I'm a mirror. That's the reason. You go ask AI. We've already done all this research, and it's getting closer and closer to just being cut and dried. It's a monopoly. It's antitrust.
So just to kind of weigh in here on the whole legal side of things, I think a lot of this comes back to Section 230, I think it's the Communications Act or whatever it's called. And because Section 230 is what basically gives the Wikimedia Foundation immunity from any sort of legal action, and they said put it back onto the editors. But of course, how can you sue someone who's anonymous, right? And so with Section 230 was a big debate a few years ago. All the focus was on like Facebook and Google and Twitter, et cetera, but Wikipedia never came up. And I think that we need to try and get that back into the conversation, and so that Wikipedia needs to be part of this conversation regarding Section 230. Now to Dave's point about I agree a little, somewhat, in that that the media is a big problem as to why Wikipedia reads the way that it does. But another part of it is academia too. Wikipedia editors are very deferential toward academic sources, and we've seen in the past year how there are all kinds of ideological activists as professors, who promulgate the pro-Hamas narrative. And so Wikipedia editors, because we know that there are so many anti-Israel professors to choose from, these anti-Israel editors will selectively choose, their favorite, anti-Israel academic, whether it's Norman Finkelstein or Elon Pape or Rashid Holiday, any one of these guys, and will use them to justify lines of text like that the Zionist founders wanted as much land with as many Jews and as few Arabs as possible. That's in the lead of the Zionism article, and it's wrong. That is factually incorrect. But these editors, they justified it because they cited a whole bunch of anti-Zionist professors, and then they selectively quoted Benny Morris. And so I think when we talk about Wikipedia, we need to talk about how the role academia plays in this. And just one last point here, Heritage Foundation was mentioned. In response to that forward article that Betty brought up, Wikipedia editors have now just blacklisted Heritage Foundation as a source. And blacklisted has a specific Wikipedian term, meaning that its URL, Heritage URL, it can't be cited anywhere at all on Wikipedia. Now, when I talk to editors about this, the general sense I've heard is that unfortunately Heritage kind of had this coming. They brought it on themselves, once they started pitching that idea. But this is generally not what the blacklist is used for. Blacklist, as I understand it, is usually used to stop media spam or whatever, not for not for here what they're doing to Heritage. And so I think that by saying Heritage can't be used at all as a source, I think that basically will worsen the bias on Wikipedia, both in terms of Israel and with American politics more broadly.
I want to agree with David on this issue of the train has left the station a bit, and I work on this every single day on these issues too. So it's almost upsetting for me to say on something that the train, but I'll raise 3 ways where that happened. One is because a lot of the information for years that has been on Wikipedia is in so many other sources now. People have quoted and re-quoted things from Wikipedia for decades now, and it's all over. So one, it's you won't be able to know who's, what article, who's spreading, and where that source came from, and where that kind of idea came from anymore. That trend has definitely left. On the AI side, I mean, so many models have been trained on Wikipedia that unless you manage to kind of figure out how they can, untrain and remove that data, it's just that data is going to be there. And once they kind of train, let's say in 1 year, it's going to go back and be unbiased and great. Again, the train is off the station. The data has been trained. It's been giving outputs. It's a bit late. Maybe better late than never, but definitely late. And then also this whole idea, and I think, but Aaron is pushing to convince Boaz with me on doing a session about social media and content moderation. But this whole idea that the people, if the people just do it, and if the people can comment, if the people, if you just give free rein to people to edit and to moderate information and data and knowledge, it's the best solution. That idea has trickled so much now that we see it with X community notes for content moderation. Now Meta is moving to community notes. And I want to just flag this, hey, this is what happens when you give people. We see when you give the people, when there's not enough, centralized, neutral, as much as there's a lot of other problems with content moderation, etc. But at least we know that this is really open to manipulation, as I mentioned. But that idea that let's give people to do editing has also just left the station. It's an easy, cheaper solution for many of the companies to just say it's not us, it's them, and go ahead and save money on tens of thousands of trust and safety people, editors, So that's also a big problem.
Hey, Christian, you were finally going to speak, and I would definitely waiting to hear from you, please.
Absolutely. I was waiting for the right time. So I'd like to offer a little bit of hope, not so much on search, Google and the like, because those interests are firmly entrenched, and there's a great deal of money that has already been allocated. But on the issue of AI, I don't think the train has left the station. And the reason that I say that is that just recently, OpenAI released their newest and best model. And of course, it went to the top of the charts and had the best results on the benchmarks. Shortly thereafter, Google released a competitor. That competitor exceeded the capabilities of OpenAI's models slightly. And then they were number one, and OpenAI was number two. And then just a couple of months after that, X released Grok 3, and Grok 3 is now at the top of the leaderboard. So the AI train actually has not left the station. That's item number one. Item number two, with Justapedia, we actually could produce a data set to replace the Wikipedia data set. That's not beyond our capabilities. It's not even all that difficult. We do need a lot more work still on the editing, but we can give you a snap-in replacement for the Wikipedia data set to be plugged into some other model. So if you're able to convince one of these other competitors, and of course there are the Chinese as well, if you're able to convince one of these other competitors to replace the Wikipedia data set, you literally can turn that around. That train has not left the station. That is very much in active contention, and it is still possible to win.
Yeah, the optimism, I'll take it.
Yeah, I definitely want to take the optimism. I love that you brought up AI, because that's going to segue me into the first of my questions that I have from readers. But that's the perfect opportunity I'm going to have for us to take a quick 2 to 3 minute break. Everybody can go use the bathroom, whatever you need to do. Come back in 2 to 3 minutes. Let's all continue when we're back here. When we come back, David Weissman, I would like you to chime in as well. I don't mind you being very polite and listening, but we do want to hear from you as well. But we're going to continue where we left off in a second with AI. 2 to 3 minutes. This is wonderful, and as always, there's always some more dominant voices than others. That's a personality thing, and there's always some people who tell me afterwards, I'm glad I didn't speak. I had a great time listening, but I want to make sure everybody actually does speak. So in particular, David Weissman, because there's two Davids, that's why I'm saying your last name. Please be a little bit less polite and chime in a little bit.
Okay.
And so on. And so on, and just none of you be afraid, and it's fine to raise your hand. It's also fine to interrupt. That's all.
The reality is that, everything I was going to say has already been said by this great audience. But what I will say is quite interesting is that, people will know that the Bible itself is not allowed to be used as a source, which also is a big problem in trying to write about a history and whatnot when we actually can't use the Tanakh. But, that gives me faith in a paradoxical or ironic way, because I've read this story before, and I think the Wikipedia is going to be a digital Tower of Babel, and we all know how that story ended. So I think that Hashem will have the last say in terms of how this is all going to play out. Because
That's really interesting though. Question though, I didn't know. Probably everyone else on here knew, but I didn't know that the Bible can't be used as a source at all. Does that mean that it's in that blacklist that some of you spoke about?
No, that's out. No. But but like I said, blacklist is a very specific Wikipedian term. It means that the URL can't be used, and it has to be a whole process. I think with the Bible, it's more about like with Wikipedia. I think editors would just say that like we rely on scholarship and journalism, which the Bible really is neither. It's religious text. My view on this, at least as far as like Jewish Israeli history goes, is that I'm not sure that that the Bible is necessarily needed to fix the bias in Wikipedia. I think there's enough academic scholarship from pro-Israel academics and Jewish academics and so forth that like if they were just given their proper due, which is Wikipedian term, on Wikipedia, then I think it could be fixed. But again, it comes down to like numbers game and the community of editors. And actually, I wanted to address what Shlomit said earlier about like what the community looks like on Wikipedia. A study by The Critic, which is a British magazine, found that the average Wikipedia editor is some dude working a desk job who reads the Guardian's desktop format. Of course, we know like how like very left-wing and anti-Israel the Guardian is. But also, Americans are a relative minority on Wikipedia as far as editors go. The majority of Wikipedia editors are actually Europeans. And there are a lot of Wikipedians who hold kind of like weird, like kind of Marxist, anarchist views. I mean, they are not plotting to take down the state or anything. They're just kind of like weird old internet dudes. I'm usually kind of people that make up the Wikipedia community as far as editors go. And I think once you start seeing it in that light, you start to understand why Wikipedia reads the way that it does.
I got to emphasize that was a really good point, Aaron. I've talked about that for years, that Wikipedia has an international perspective. So when you understand that, well, what's the international community perspective on Israel? That's what you're getting.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah. Right. And that's why they're so deferential towards like Amnesty International, or Human Rights Watch, like B'Tselem, like these NGOs that are so very biased against Israel. It's like they're treated as like gods on Wikipedia.
Well, I have a question though. I want to still get back to the other David's point in terms of the Bible, bringing in what Ohad was telling us earlier about Arabic Wikipedia, and that really all the rules go out the window there in terms of sourcing. I'm going to just venture and make an educated guess that the Arabic version of Wikipedia is allowed to use the Quran as a source.
So everything is allowed in Arabic Wikipedia. There's not really allowed and not allowed. My guess is that when you're talking about not using the Bible, I mean, you can have in any entry, you can have a section that says the biblical way of telling things, or the biblical narrative, and that way it kind of frames it as this is what it says in the Bible, which is an important part of this and that religion. But in the Arabic version, you can quote from the Quran as not as this is what the Quran says as part of the religious narrative, rather as this is the truth. This is the scholarly truth. And I haven't seen, it might be also true for other Middle Eastern / Far Asian languages such as Urdu and Persian. But yeah, that's one of the main differences of the two Wikipedias.
I just want to mention something briefly, because I don't know if we're going to come back to Arabic Wikipedia, but I have a friend, actually, my oldest friend in the world, Itai Chamiel, little shout out to him, Israeli as his name sounds. And he actually has been very supportive of my efforts. And back on January 3rd, 2024, he messaged me the following: By the way, Boaz, did you notice the Arabic language Wikipedia has a message in support of Gaza at the top of every single
banner.
page? I wonder what the reactions would be if the Hebrew language version had an Am Yisrael Chai on the top of every page. It would be the Jews control the media, boycott Wikipedia, stop donations. But if it's on the other side, silence. He noticed that he scoured the internet. This is January 3rd, a year ago. He scoured the internet. There were no threads discussing this. He didn't find any articles about it. He didn't find anything on Reddit about it. So he sent this my way. I'm a full-time nurse. My wife would divorce me if I did this more than once a month, what we're doing now. So I took this and I found my sources at the Jewish Journal and at other places, and I got this out there, and I was able to get this written. Another thing that he found was that there was an entire date that Arabic Wikipedia was blackened for an entire day as a black square in every entry, and it was like in support of essentially very politically biased against Israel. So ultimately, I was able to get articles written about this, and I'm glad some people know. But some of you were aware of this, right? The banner on the top of Arabic Wikipedia.
The banner was there from day one or day two of the war. It's almost as if they pre-made it. And it already said stop the massacre and stop the genocide before anyone started talking about the ICJ, ICC cases. So as I said, it's very skewed. I did get, when I did my big report, I did get an answer from Wikimedia Israel about this issue. And they kind of said every community in Wikipedia runs independently. The Arab Wikipedia community has decided to exploit the Wikipedia brand resources for inappropriate political use. We expressed our protest, but they unfortunately, to Wikimedia Foundation, they unfortunately refrained from interfering with the Arab community's decision, which, as was said in the beginning, that's what Wikimedia does. Even though, from what I understand, and maybe people here can expand more, the people on the Wikimedia board are also usually not that far away from these progressive / anti-Israel views as well. That's what I heard. I haven't really dug too deep into it, but if anyone knows about it, then maybe
is that banner still there right now? If somebody were to look
as
for
we
it?
speak, yes, sir.
I think it might be down. The Arabic Wikipedia also used to have the globe logo of Wikipedia and draped in the Palestinian colors of green, white, red, and black. And nowadays, it looks like it might have returned to normal, but
it's gone. Wow. How did that happen?
The war ended.
Probably it's the Jews controlling the media.
No, it's since the war ended. I mean, since the fighting at least ended, so they removed it for now.
But imagine how insane it is for the logo of Wikipedia to have expressed supposed solidarity with the Palestinian cause. And I put Palestinian in quotation marks here because I'm not sure this is such a noble cause for all Palestinians, which was led by Hamas's war. But just imagine how insane it is for, I don't recall Wikipedia doing this in Ukrainian colors when Russia was invaded. I don't recall any aspect of Wikipedia ever changing their colors, regardless of the language or their supposed affiliation to a national people. It's insane bias, and that's all that there is to be said.
There's an article one of our editors wrote called Radicalization of Education. And it kind of blends in with a lot of what's happening in Wikipedia, because they have these editathons, and I've been to several of the WikiCons up in Boston and Ohio State. They have them all at the universities. That's where they have their source. It's a huge pool of editors, and they're using those kids. And at the same time, they're influencing them to their beliefs. And these are the radical teachers. And of course, it's always going to be a radical that's going to round up their prey, right? Because that's basically what's happening in the schools. Universities play a huge role on Wikipedia. The professors are editing. A lot of them are administrators. Don't think for 1 minute that there's not a lot of paid editors there. I can't divulge a lot of information because I still do VRT at the Wikimedia side. They've tried to get me off, Wikipedia editors have tried to get me off that side because they're the emails that are sent, people griping about things that Wikipedia does. And I had a professor actually tell me that, he was willing to pay $1,500 for his article. And I said, oh, no, we don't do that, no. But let me tell you, it's happening all the time.
Well, as
and that's why they fight so hard. They will fight you to the end. They're making too much money.
Yeah, as Yfat said, they've never gotten a response nearly as long as this as this person who wrote a letter to them, and maybe it has to go through their fundraising end to go. Before I get to my next question, Jordan actually has, I believe, a memorial for his grandfather, so that he has to run to. So I'm just going to say goodbye to Jordan and appreciate it. Any last words that you were about to say before you kick yourself off?
No, just a mega thank you, Boaz, for hosting me. A fine production as always, and such an esteemed panel, and an honor to join. And so thank you so much, and looking forward to being in touch.
Thank you, and thank you to your organization, Stand With Us. I look forward to continuing to partner with you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Yes.
Take care.
So
I want to say something about the Wikipedia Foundation. There is something that is happening there that we have to look at in the way it moves from an organization, a non-profit organization, to calling itself a movement, to talking about EDI, which I'm all in favor of EDI, but obviously they are not accomplishing it.
EDI is what?
Equality, diversity, inclusion. So they are spending millions of dollars on these actually notions, ideological notions, and seeing themselves as a movement and declaring that they are a movement. So this their commitment to neutrality is undermined by these practices, and there's a there's like a good cause to examine where the money goes. For example, they spent millions of dollars on gender equality, which in my view is extremely important, but did they succeed in making any change in that direction? The answer is no. So the whole idea also that like former CEO of Wikipedia Wikimedia Foundation going to a TED Talk and saying the truth doesn't matter. It's more about having the right ideas, having the community. So these are very, very dangerous ideas promoted by the Wikimedia Foundation itself, English Wikimedia Foundation, I have to say, or the International Wikimedia Foundation. And there's like a lot of questions to be asked. What happens to the money of donors? What does it mean that that an organization that is in charge of knowledge becomes a movement? Because a movement has an ideology, and knowledge, as much we try to balance it. So there's a lot of questions to be asked, and like liability again is an issue related to the Wikimedia Foundation and to Wikipedia itself, even though it is somehow presented as anyone can edit. It belongs to everyone. It doesn't belong to everyone, and not everyone can edit. So there are some issues there.
It sounds like it really does try to hide, but Wikipedia as a whole kind of tries to hide behind being a neutral entity, similarly to how UNRWA for years has been trying to claim to be a neutral entity. And we all know, certainly everybody who's on this knows exactly what UNRWA's true colors have been, and it's more than just a few bad actors there. Hillel Neuer and his UN Watch have been fighting it for eons, and only now are actually getting somewhere with countries in the world acknowledging it. But these are certainly not the first times that these countries in the world have been told about what UNRWA was doing. It's just the first time that it's sort of that the mask has been revealed in such a public way. So the question that the first question that I'm going to have for you guys is, if you think that it's not a completely false comparison, Wikipedia and UNRWA, in terms of what they should be versus what they are, then how do we get going forward with forward momentum? How do we actually get going the same way that Hillel was able to finally make progress with UNRWA? How do we get the world to actually make progress in terms of this? Now, I assume that with UNRWA, most people seem to just want to throw it out because it's so incredibly tainted and not necessarily try to fix it. But so the question is, I don't think anybody's going to suggest we're throwing out Wikipedia, right? I don't think anybody's about to say Wikipedia is about to just get banned as a solution. So how do we essentially fix Wikipedia or people's perception of Wikipedia? Like David Swindle was saying earlier,
Right.
it might be an impossible task.
So, I would say its biggest currency is its credibility. So if there are articles that highlight its lack of credibility, that's what will sort of get their Achilles heel, so to speak. So articles that sort of like Aaron's done and Ashley's done, more of those that really highlight sort of, what happens when you let the inmates take over the asylum, that will really like show that their credibility's not there.
I think there's
Do enough people read these articles? Do the Ashleys and the Aarons and all of yous of the world, are these articles being read enough to actually make sizable change and not just be preaching to the choir?
Well, I think there's a lot of conversation about the contents and the topics of the articles, a good bit of which is happening on x.com. So if you can, what should I say here? So the world is actually changing, right? We've spoken a lot about how Google has a dominant position and has a tendency to control the narrative. And that has certainly been true, but it's actually decreasing sharply. So if you've paid attention to search generally and Google specifically over the past, let's say, year, the quality of your search results is declining precipitously. And people are increasingly moving away from Google for just sort of general knowledge gathering. I mean, it's a great place to go and find a product that you want to buy. It's not necessarily that good a place to go and find information about any kind of topic anymore. It's definitely not what it was 10 years ago. And as those conversations migrate away to platforms like X, if you can exert influence more effectively on the emerging platforms rather than on the receding platforms, then I think you have a long-term strategy that could be effective. And if you're able to produce an alternative to compare against a Wikipedia page, preferably that has a similar URL at a different domain, like what Betty's doing with Justapedia, then I think you can compare and contrast. And when the conversations happen, you can begin to exert influence within those conversations.
You're saying that that Google has definitely gone down and like clearly okay for shopping, but not for information. But is that something that the average person actually knows? Because I don't believe they do. I think the most people are still using Google and assuming it's the go-to and just as good as it was when they started using Google.
Yeah, but not for political conversations, right? I mean, if you use it on a consistent basis, you will definitely see the decline. And increasingly, more and more people are using LLMs to ask questions. And when you talk about a political conversation, people will effectively ask a question, right? So search was never that great a paradigm, because when you're approaching a political topic, you're not really searching for something, you're asking a question. And people are now asking questions of LLMs rather than searching for the information and trying to analyze it themselves.
Define. Please tell us what an LLM is, by the way.
A large language model, essentially the AI products.
I want to put this in a bit of the bigger picture, in the sense of, we're focused on Wikipedia and we're focused on, a little bit more on Israel, but this bias, we see it across all platforms, social media platforms, etc. The manipulation, the number games. I mean, it's not just Wikipedia, it's really across the board. It's not just in Israel. I mean, I see it a lot. I work with Jewish communities, a lot of Jewish community issues. And there were a lot of examples even mentioned today that are much broader than that. And so as we go back to the solution, or us, one of the things that can do it happen, because none of it is a solution on its own, which is just idea of digital literacy, right? Every intern who's ever come, I've been with the WGC over 10 years now, I always say one of the first things, do not use Wikipedia as your source, right? It's not a reliable source. Go there maybe to get links, to get maybe a very initial idea. It's not a source for me. You need to go to let's talk about what sources are. And explaining that. Today, the problem is, as we said, then they'll go to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will bring back Wikipedia as a source on everything, and that's a bit of a separate problem that needs to be addressed. But it's this idea of teaching people where to find information, how to look at sources more reliably, what would make a source reliable, how to do that research, how to look at more than one source. There's a lot of things what I see when I get, papers from students, etc. Don't look at one source. Don't say, oh, I found my answer and now here's the response, but look at different sources and cross-check and reference. That whole process of explaining how to do research on anything, even on how much your tomatoes cost in the, in the store today, and actually checking that that's the price you should pay. That's something that we need to teach from very young to obviously to the very old or older who use. So this whole idea of digital literacy and questioning information that you just access and explain to people what Wikipedia actually is, and it's not an encyclopedia written by experts, but it's just people putting whatever they want out there in some sort of open process, is going to be key.
I want to actually ask a question that was written over here for you, and it's very specific to what you're talking about. So we are seeing a major shift in social media moderation with companies like X, like Christian was just telling us, relying more on user-driven fact-checking, such as community notes, instead of AI-based content moderation. So question for you is, based on Wikipedia's experience, do you see risks in this approach?
For what I just mentioned, I think it's incredibly risky, and it needs to be taken into account. Doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't work well, community notes doesn't have its advantages. Fact-checking had a lot of disadvantages, does have a lot of disadvantages to how they work too. But I think opening it up completely to people, at least you need to recognize that it's not going to result in neutral information, okay? That's not going to be the end result of opening it to people. If you're questioning what you are seeing as information, if you're just opening it to public, what you're going to get is not going to be neutral information. That's just not how the process works. So at the very least, acknowledge that if I'm opening it to community notes, to Wikipedia editing, I'm not going to get this neutral encyclopedia of everything in the world. I'm going to get some other product. And the same if I'm doing it online on any other platform, at least recognize I'm going to be getting people's not neutral, not objective positioning on these topics. And maybe, I'm a lawyer, maybe at the end of the day, it will bring some truth out. Probably not exactly how it works.
Wikipedia is just a mirror of mainstream media. Everything they say is cited. And if it's not cited and somebody challenges it, they have to provide a source. And that's, again, it all goes right back to the sources they use. And that it's called objectivity. They do not pick their sources objectively. They pick the sources that align with their systemic bias.
But you have to use a source, but you don't have to use both types of sources or different types of sources, right?
Right.
So and that's part of it. So you can choose, if you have 10 sources and they're 5 and 5, they're completely balanced, nobody's making you use those sources in the same amount of time, in the same amount of words even. I can put 2 words from one source and call it, hey, I use this source, and 2 paragraphs from another one and say, I used balanced sources. So that's a problem. But again, it's like you can do whatever you want with those sources and information and how you present it.
Yeah. In principle, I was saying, in principle, if you have a controversial topic with many takes, in say academic literature, the Wikipedia article is supposed to reflect those sources in proportion to how they exist out in the literature about the topic. But of course, I mean, the bias is ultimately going to be determined by the people who make the article, who show up and make the article. So
yeah, we just provide all different views. That way there's no bias. We let the readers decide. And Wikipedia could do the same thing, but they won't. They're using it as a weapon. There's a purpose for it.
Did Wikipedia, when it initially started, Betty and Jonathan, who's been there even longer, when it started, did it have the same methodology as what you're saying Justapedia did, or did it never function the same way?
Well, like I was saying, in 2016 is when I started seeing the difference. When I started putting in Fox News, for example, that's when they went after Fox News.
Right, but forget about 2016. When we go back to its inception,
Jonathan,
was it functioning the way?
No, I don't think any of the principles have changed. It's just that the mix. I would say the mix of people editing it and the degree to which certain people have gotten a disproportionate amount of control has changed. It's kind of like the principles haven't changed. I think this is what's happened with Wikipedia is mirrors what's happened in media and in academia. People, there's the phrase like the long march through the institutions, about particularly like leftist activists entrenching themselves in these institutions and slowly building their view to take a dominant position in that institution. I think that Wikipedia is another example of an institution where that's happened.
Yes, I agree. 100% nailed it.
I want to back up what Betty's been saying about Wikipedia as a mirror. And I think big picture wise, there's something we need to think about. And that is ADL had their recent Global 100. They put out new data polling the entire world. And right now, the number of people on the planet that believe 6 or more anti-Semitic tropes is 46%. 10 years ago, it was 20% less than that. So in just 10 years, we've seen 20% more anti-Semites. And that's going to be reflected in Wikipedia. It's going to be reflected all over the internet. And it's just going to keep growing and growing as these ideas further spread. So that's what we need to brace ourselves for, is that the culture has changed over the last 10 years, over the last 20 years, and it's going to get a hell of a lot worse.
And it's in the Ivy League universities, I'm afraid to say it, but that's what it is. It's at Harvard. It's at all in the Northeast. And then you go down to Berkeley, and then you hit over into California. And these are the active editors. That's where they're coming from. If you look at the IP addresses, you'll see it.
Well, I don't know about that.
It's not just
so many editors that come from different places, but definitely anti-Semitism is spreading. And I want to share a small anecdote that there was an article on Wikipedia, very, very interesting article with the title of Anti-Semitism on Wikipedia. And what happened to this article? It has been downsized and moved to another article called Criticism on Wikipedia. So the ability of the community to reflect, to realize, to listen, and to really absorb the idea that they are biased is not there at all right now. So they are willing, if there's like really research and there's like specific complaints, as was regarding certain people, they do quiet them down by taking a few people and banning them from editing on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or taking some editors who misused Wikipedia about Holocaust-related articles, but they are not willing to change and to really realize, which is the first step, is to really understand and to name the phenomenon. And once they are unwilling to really embrace the fact that Wikipedia had turned to anti-Semitic, to embrace the fact that it's extremely biased against Israel, then it is very, very difficult to correct it from within. And that calls for all kinds of solutions that some of us had brought up.
Go ahead, Mathilda. You've been raising your hand politely.
Yeah, I went to boarding school, so it's kind of like a... And then I moved to Israel. It's definitely not a thing here.
As long as you don't do the Elon Musk for hand raise. That's the
No, definitely not the Elon Musk. So two things, both are speedy-ish, but one is that kind of building on what Shlomit said was with the banning of editors, is that I noticed actually that sometimes the bans are more like a suspension and sometimes not even for that long. I wrote a piece back in October about a specific Wikipedia editor who was changing specific things on the Zionism page to kind of from an anti-Zionist perspective, and they were being reverted, and he was entering, or he or she, I don't know, I'm assuming, into a kind of edit war, was then banned, but then reinstated like about a week later, and is still editing. As far as I can see, the last edit by this editor was the 9th of February, so definitely wasn't a permanent ban. So there's also kind of behind the scenes, we don't actually know necessarily how long people are prevented from re-editing that page for, or like if they're allowed to edit other pages with very similar themes. So there are those kind of things to consider. The other thing I was going to mention is that a lot of the discussion that we've had is quite applicable to English Wikipedia, English language Wikipedia, which I would argue is more advanced in terms of its procedures than other language Wikipedias. For example, Spanish language Wikipedia, which I read a lot. For the first thing, they don't source nearly as much as English language Wikipedia. And when they do source, it won't have that list of sources you see with English language Wikipedia. You might have one, you might have two. And I would argue Spanish language Wikipedia is a lot more biased against Israel than English language Wikipedia. For example, if you go on, there's no page for October 7 massacre. The page is Al-Aqsa flood. And then underneath it, it says alternative names October 7 massacre, which is quite a significant thing if you compare it to what is the English language title. And you'll also notice on Spanish language Wikipedia that people like Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniyeh, if they mention them as a terrorist or anything to do with terrorist attacks, it's always put in quotation marks, which is an implicit kind of way of saying, of reducing the credibility of that claim or fact or whatever it is. By putting it in quotation marks, you're essentially shedding doubt on something, and therefore to the readers reading it, it's not Yahya Sinwar the terrorist, it's he's been accused of terrorist by who? Most likely by Israel. And so in terms of also their sourcing, the first source they use for Yahya Sinwar is Al Jazeera, and so it's kind of like English language Wikipedia has many issues, but even more so other Wikipedia. Obviously, we've spoken about Arabic, but definitely I've noticed that with Spanish Wikipedia, and it's spoken about less, and therefore probably more of an issue because it can proliferate without kind of intervention if there's not that much attention on that. That was what I was going to say.
It's very interesting to talk about because my most recent article on Wikipedia was about actually the French Wikipedia and how this guy who's an activist with this organization called the Urgence Palestine Collective or whatever is running this Wikipedia club, and he claims he's just trying to get the Palestinian viewpoint on Wikipedia more balanced. I mean, based on this report from a French journalist, they're basically manipulating the French Wikipedia and turning it into like a Palestinian propaganda arm. And what's interesting is that this particular person was apparently involved. At least the screenshots I have seen was involved in this Discord server channel called Tech for Palestine. And this guy, he's saying in the channel, "Oh, hey, we have a French Wikipedia team. we just updated the French Wikipedia article on the red triangle, the Hamas red triangle, to try and enhance, the resistance point of view. And if you read the article on the red triangle, this Rouge triangle in French, it definitely has a lot about to portray it as like a resistance symbol. Whereas the English version of that article on the English Wikipedia, it's actually a lot more balanced. So I think there's something to Mathilda's point that like these other language Wikipedias outside of English might actually be worse to a degree. And so also Mathilda's point where she talked about that one editor who was banned for a week. That's not uncommon. One of the things of Wikipedia is that like it's basically an arcane bureaucratic system, and it's very easy to run afoul of those policies. And if you do, then you get sanctioned. For contentious topics, Wikipedia has what's called discretionary sanctions, which means that any admin that's considered uninvolved in the dispute at hand can just come in and sanction you at any time. But most of the time now, admins will defer and wait for. There are sort of like lower courts of sorts in Wikipedia, different venues where editors can report other editors for being what's called disruptive. And that's kind of a catch-all term to mean sort of anything that goes against a Wikipedia policy, anything that just goes against consensus or whatever. And then, so they can get reported there, and then admins will kind of deliberate amongst themselves as to whether or not someone gets sanctioned, other community members weigh in. And so what's happened over time is that these at least pro-Hamas editors, and I think also editors more broadly, have figured out how to game the system and kind of use these policies not only to entrench their narrative as neutrality, but also to bait other editors who are trying to be neutral and use these policies against them to try and get them sanctioned. And then that's like one less player. Like Wikipedia is a numbers game. So if you're able to sort of like get your opposition banned, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to entrench your narrative into Wikipedia. And the pro-Hamas side has been very, very good about this.
It's really it's such an incredibly Jewish way of talking. Basically, this line of conversation is just like, yeah, we've just listed the 100 reasons and ways that things are terrible, but hey, if you look at every other part of the world, it's even worse. So we're not so bad. The English language one is actually like good compared to like every other language. It's like this is how Jews have coped for millennia. It's like, well, at least we're not currently in the Holocaust. Now we're just dealing with pogroms, and it's like it's ridiculous. And by the way, I really liked Mathilda's little thing that I don't want people to miss who are watching later about how important we've talked multiple times here about subtle things that are incredibly insidious and important that make a difference. She talked about quotation marks making something feel less valuable. Like, for example, when I talk about Mathilda right now as being a journalist, I have a feeling she probably finds that offensive and condescending because it is.
It's very hard to offend me.
A scare quote. Yeah.
I'm trying to offend you, damn it.
Try harder. You're gonna have to.
So my point is, for somebody watching, it makes a lot of sense because we visually see this. And likewise, it sort of adds to this little pile up of things we've talked about during this, which are other subtle things. Another example given from I forget who it was before, was mentioning that you notice that maybe they'll talk about something as being a terrorist group, but it's paragraph 3 or paragraph 8 makes a huge difference. And so we keep talking about all of these little examples. As I say, they're more of an insidious way of manipulating things that, okay, technically, letter of the law, and a judge looks at this, they're going to say, you know what, there's technically more than one source. Happens to be one source is given this much and one source is given another. Technically, both things are listed. One of them happens to be first, one of them happens to be on the bottom. One of them is in quotation marks, one of them isn't. Anybody who uses their brain, their seichel, is going to understand that these things make a massive difference in terms of how people will perceive it. But letter of the law, they're technically doing what they're saying that they have to be doing, and therefore it makes it easier to get away with it. Question for you guys, and John Weiss actually sort of referred to this for a second. So I have a question. Dr. Brian Gantwerker, he happens to actually be a prominent spine surgeon who did my spine surgery. He is asking, is there an actual organized effort influencing Wikipedia's content, and specifically who funds and manages it, and are there foreign actors involved? We've talked about foreign actors a few times this chat, but nobody's actually told me straight on, are there foreign actors involved in this or not really?
Yes, there are. Something I think the news recently, like as I mentioned earlier, was this Tech for Palestine Discord server where they were openly. This was a public channel, like anyone could join this channel, so they could. So it's all been screenshotted. People could see what they were doing, where they were openly trying to put the Palestinian narrative into Wikipedia articles. So one of the things they talked about was like there are a bunch of artists that signed this letter calling for the Biden administration to call for a ceasefire at the Gaza war. So every celebrity that signed that letter, this server, they would assign people to go and add to each celebrity's Wikipedia page who signed this letter and mention on their page that they signed this letter. You know, so I think one of them is like Alyssa Milano, Hassan Minaj. At the end of the day, like honestly, who cares if these people signed a letter? Like, why do I care if like David Cross or Alyssa Milano or whomever signed a letter calling for a ceasefire? The Wikipedia articles are supposed to reflect like a 10-year or 20-year perspective, meaning that like if a Wikipedia article about a person, for instance, it's like, what are we going to remember about this person in 10 years? Are we really going to remember this particular actor signed a ceasefire letter like in 10 or 20 years' time? I think the answer would be no. But because these people were coordinating to get this into these Wikipedia pages, it's like they're kind of astroturfing it to make it seem more important than it really is. So that's one example of coordination. And what makes this kind of scary is that, like, again, this was a public Discord chat. Like, how many others out there are there that are close to the public that we don't know about? I would imagine there's a lot. And maybe with time that they'll be uncovered. But there also been reports of like, I remember reading last year, there was a column in Town Hall where I interned at briefly, where I talked about how like the Iranian regime, has edited Wikipedia to try and whitewash, the Iranian regime's atrocities. There have been examples of I think the Saudi government found a bunch of people editing Wikipedia and then prosecuted them, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are plenty of government actors involved in Wikipedia, but we don't know the extent because these people are all anonymous. Like, I get back to Shlomit's point earlier of like, should we try and require people to like reveal their full identity? And there's definitely a case to be made for that, because if you write an article, like, for my articles, like, I have my name out there, my byline's at stake every time I publish an article, like, and I'm fine with that. That's just part of the game. On Wikipedia, on a site that everyone reads, that as we all know is a go-to site for information, these people just have pseudonyms for the most part, so their byline isn't attached. So it's a case to me that their byline should be attached when these articles are being widely read by people worldwide and then permeates our culture at large. However, I think that I don't think that let me rephrase this. The reason why anonymity exists to the extent that it does in Wikipedia is because a lot of editors are afraid of being doxxed and harassed, because these are obviously very contentious topics. And so the community will never agree to make everyone reveal their full names because they're just too afraid of being doxxed and harassed. And I think that certainly is a valid concern too. So I don't know what the answer is there. But these are the kinds of things that need to be talked about when we're discussing this.
Isn't there some way? I thought of this earlier when Shlomit made her point and Mathilda explained the argument against it in terms of anonymity. Isn't there a way to sort of split the difference and give identifying labels to the people who are going, not usernames, but descriptors that still maintain anonymity? To give you an example.
That's an interesting question. And there are some people
by the way,
my
example, by the way, just to compare, for the typical Joe Schmo at home, what the number one thing that we're reading about is sports and entertainment. Okay, that's what most people read about. No offense to all of you who don't write about sports and entertainment. So that and what ends up happening is, let's just say we get to the Oscars, right? The biggest award show of the year. What the big outlets will do, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Entertainment Weekly, is they will do these actual interviews. They will talk to people and see who they're voting for. And they'll get their explanations, not just who it is, but why they did it. And they will describe who these people are without providing their names. They will not say Steven Spielberg said such and such. They will say the following is a prominent director who has been nominated multiple times and has achieved. And that way, the people still maintain their anonymity while there is a degree of accountability there. Couldn't this use that sort of technique?
So that's an interesting question. Some editors do say like, oh, I'm a software engineer. Oh, I'm a professor, of archaeology or whatever. But like, how do you know that they're being truthful who they are? It's like 2005, there was a controversy about a Wikipedia editor called SJ, who portrayed himself as like, this prestigious academic and whatever. But then his real identity was discovered, and he was just some random dude. So it's like, so again, like how do we know that these people are who they say they are? Again, these are the issues that we have to sort of consider when we talk about Wikipedia.
Definitely. Yeah. And we have to remember that knowledge is situated. Knowledge, especially on sensitive matters, is not something that is out there. It's situated knowledge. It depends on your point of view. It depends on the place you were born. It depends on your gender. It depends. So it's situated knowledge, and knowledge that has no accountability could not be real knowledge. So, and that's what is eventually is happening. It's true. When I write something, I'm accountable for it. I publish all kinds of articles. So sometimes after I appear on TV or I publish something, I get criticized. And Hannah Arendt, the philosopher, she talked about it. She said, okay, if you want to be public, you can like really affect others, but there's also consequences to that. So here, the whole element of consequence, of standing, of being accountable for what you said doesn't exist. So that's one point about the real issue behind anonymity on Wikipedia. And obviously the community won't, vote for that, but maybe someone else has to intervene and make it, at least in certain topics, a must. When you edit, you should put your name. So we know where that knowledge comes from. What is your point of view? Is it a white person writing about Black people? There are a lot of issues related to knowledge that deals with sensitive topics. And the second issue is the gender aspect. In my research for my PhD, I interviewed 31 women, all of them activists, all of them wanted to edit on Wikipedia, and eventually almost none of them did. So anonymity for women means like walking in a dark alley. You don't know who you are surrounded with. There are people you're not related to, faces, to picture, to anything that is tangible. So for women with women experiences in the world of being molested, of being attacked, editing in Wikipedia is much more hazardous. So I think the issue of anonymity, of having names, of having identification is really crucial, not only to verify whatever is written, but also in terms of having a safe environment, really encouraging people to connect their user pages to their social media using real names, because at the moment, anyone who writes like myself with their actual username is harassed much more, because everything I ever wrote on outside Wikipedia is really held against me. So right now, people who wants to say, okay, this is my views, this is my opinions, this is how I see things, really pay an incredible price. And I don't think it should be allowed.
Swindle, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I want to introduce two terms into this discussion that are really controversial on Wikipedia. Does anybody know the terms sock puppet and meat puppet?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, I do.
Those are pretty significant concepts. A sock puppet is when you have an extra account that you edit to make it look like you're 2 or 3 people. That's one of the things with anonymity. So you can make it look like there's more people supporting your point of view. That's a big no-no on Wikipedia. They have these things called sock puppet investigations, where they try and figure out, oh, is this person actually this person? But they also have meat puppets. A meat puppet is when you have somebody else, totally different person, and you tell them what you want the editing to be. And they have ways to figure out, oh, this person appears to be making the same sort of edits that this person is. And these are built in because, like, for example, let's say all of us on the call decide we're going to work together to make sure it's more balanced, there's more pro-Israel content. You can't do that according to the rules. A group of people cannot organize with the intent of going and influencing Wikipedia. And now the Wikipedia internal editors have figured out how to identify that. Hence why it makes it so much more difficult to try, and you can't organize to fix it in this sense.
Well, you could. I mean, obviously, if a bunch of people privately decide to work on something together, no one's going to find out. But if I get into an argument and I recruit 5 people to back me up in the argument, and those accounts are only echoing what I'm saying and not really doing any work elsewhere in building Wikipedia, that's going to be obvious that they're meat puppets. If they're actually doing their own independent work, that's going to be something different.
And that gets back to what I was saying. Sorry, I just was one quick thing. So that gets back to what I was saying earlier about the Tech for Palestine channel. Is that the kind of coordination where like you're assigning tasks and telling people to like edit this article or whatever. There's a guideline called canvassing on Wikipedia that prohibits that kind of thing. And so any sort of like coordinated edits, telling people what to edit, that's a violation of that policy. But some editors were sanctioned on Wikipedia due to their connections to the Tech for Palestine server. What's interesting about the sock puppets, that as Dave brought up, is that like basically how these investigations work is that like they look at what's called behavioral evidence, where it's like they analyze like which articles you edit, like your writing style, to see if you match up with another account to say, hey, this person's talking.
Yeah, no, I was saying there's something called a check user that some administrators have, where they can look at technical details of how you're interacting with the site, like what kind of machine, what kind of browser details. So like
IP address.
That's sort of like a digital fingerprint, and if those match, that's another piece of evidence that this person could be a sock puppet.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Is that if there's enough of a behavioral match, they'll ask for technical evidence, which then the check user comes in and they cross-reference IP address. But of course, like some of these sophisticated editors are very good about like trying to fool the check user and so forth. So sometimes these are just educated guesses. And so there have been instances of blocked accounts that claim that like that they're not socks, of this longtime sock master. And maybe they're right. Maybe they're not right. How do we know? Because we can't see that evidence,
there could be,
and this kind of complicates things in Wikipedia because there's some who argue that these sock investigations are just another way to like ban the opposition.
Okay, I'm just gonna say put this into this whole discussion is if you want to maintain anonymity for Wikimedia, it's important to maintain anonymity. It's important for them to maintain safety. You have to be a lot more accountable for what's happening. You have all these tools, you have these mechanisms, you have these rules against canvassing, you have rules against sock puppeting, but you're just not accountable, right? If they don't have enough, arbitration mechanisms. The arbitration mechanism takes forever. Every time, this is again going to the very place where we started, Boaz, where like their first reaction is like, oh, everything's great, the system works well, like we have all of this. The first reaction should be, let us look into this quickly. We're going to see what we can do about this when people write it. You want positive discussion about AI, use AI tools to figure out what's happening on the platform and like put more investment into doing these investigations and seeing on problematic topics. And it's not just left. We see it a lot also on right things. We see on like glorification of neo-Nazis in Europe in Polish language Wikipedia, for example, is a huge problem. So across the board, just be more accountable for what you say your platform is and what you do and what you care about. If you have a rule, enforce it and make sure that you're using your power, your knowledge, your tech data that we don't have, right? Instead of me spending thousands of dollars to try and figure out, the Tech for Palestine group and how they're working on the platform, use your data that you have to figure out what's going on. So just be more accountable to your platform and what you say it is. That's one thing that
I have a sock puppet over here waiting for you guys.
I love it.
And when we do the next show, I'll do the meat puppet, but that's rated X. I'm gonna spare you all the rated X material. So listen, I want to be able to start wrapping things up because a handful of you are in Israel, and in Israel, for anybody watching this a month or so from now, in Israel right now, it's 10:30 p.m. and people have been on for a few hours, which I very much appreciate, but they're gonna have to be up again in the morning. So I've gotten to maybe about 20% of my questions, which shows just how much there is to really talk about. We're obviously only scratching the surface. So I want to ask one more main question before we all wrap up. And this one that I want to go around to you, and I want Ohad to start because Ohad might be the first one that has to bow out in any case. So what I want to ask, I want to finish things on a potentially optimistic or positive note, or if nothing else, a constructive note. My wife, who looked through all of everybody's questions, and she always does a good job of synthesizing what's the one thing that's missing. This is what she wanted to know. She said, what specific strategies can be used both within Wikipedia's editing system and through external advocacy to challenge and correct systemic bias against Jewish and Israeli topics? And really, based on this conversation, it's not just about Jewish and Israeli topics, right? It's just about general bias, which is part of the wave, as David Swindle said earlier. It's just going along with the general media bias, right? It's both a symptom and the problem. It's both. The head and the tail kind of feed each other in terms of what's chicken and egging it between media and social media and Wikipedia. So let's talk positively and constructively, starting with Ohad. I'd like you all to tell me what you think internally people can do with using Wikipedia's ingredients and not using Wikipedia's ingredients to try to do something so that 5 years from now, we have a much better system out there.
So internally, I would say whenever you see something, I'm not an editor, I'm not a very big Wikipedia guy. I did add some entries when I was during my first degree. We had a cool lesson, a cool course in which the end was uploading your own Wikipedia article. But I do sometimes go into the editing part of Wikipedia and add, for instance, citation needed when I see something that's very some sort of a statement that is not really supported by anything. So all these little editing stuff that you can do that is not hurtful for Wikipedia and that's even playing in Wikipedia's role, in Wikipedia's rules, that's outside, that's inside. Outside, and by the way, this is a chance to say hats off to Dr. Shlomit Aharoni and all of her array of volunteers who expose these biases in Wikipedia and act. You know, there's a saying in Hebrew that the sunlight is the best cleaner, the best Or Shemesh Mechateh. That's how we say
disinfectant.
Yes, thank you. And that's also what's happening now outside. We have to educate our people, our next generations, our environments, not to take Wikipedia as granted, not to believe everything that it says. Go and do your research. And now that a lot of this has come out about the bias that's in Wikipedia, about the sock puppet thing and the monopolizing of editing in Israeli-Palestinian issues, I think that it's a good thing. I think that people now see Wikipedia more for what it is. And that's something we have to keep on talking about and bringing up whenever we can. So these are the two things that I would say that we should do. And again, thanks, Boaz, for this chance, this opportunity, and thanks to everyone here for this awesome conversation and ideas and listening.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I appreciate you being on. If you have to go, I understand. I'm going to go around and have everybody give me their 2 cents on what they think we can do constructively forward. But thank you very, very much for being on.
Okay.
I'd like to continue. By the way, Shlomit, I don't know if any of you guys caught it, but she just became a James Bond villain for a moment and had her little cat on her lap that she was nefariously stroking. So that was
You
very,
got me.
that
You
was
got
very,
me,
that
boss.
was
You exposed me for
that was
being who I am.
that was very exciting for me. I want to continue going around. Let's go to who we've heard from the
But let's
least.
have short answers because it's really, really late
It's
here.
very late for everyone. So let's have everybody try to give a 1 minute or less answer as we say goodbye. So starting with Mr. Weissman, who we've heard from criminally underrepresented over there. He likes listening. So go ahead, David, and tell us, what would you do constructively forward? Give us your recommendations for the public.
So I would cultivate new editors that want to do it the right way, you know, and I think that's the first thing. I think also we have to look at getting more sources into the game, you know, as we've sort of discussed. You know, there's the things that are sort of preventing neutrality, a stacked deck in terms of the editors and their where their allegiances lie, and then the second thing is the sources at their disposal. So if we could try and arrest the imbalance on both of those things, that could maybe help somewhat internally, externally. Like I said, raise awareness. If we can sort of, for want of a better word, like make a mockery of Wikipedia, I think that's what they would make a note of. I think like the media, they don't really know much about Wikipedia unless it's like using it to write their articles for them. But, you know, when it comes to, you know, like you won't believe the latest silly thing they just did. For some reason, they really like that sort of angle of article. And so if we can say that, listen, like, you know, Wikipedia's got a an article about a horse, but it's really about a camel, you know, something like that. It's so incredibly distorted that this is sort of what has come out of the laboratory, so to speak, then I think that's what will really make them wake up.
Use clickbait as our friend, right? Everyone else uses clickbait, so why shouldn't we as well, right? Use it to our benefit.
Yeah.
It's an inventive idea. Mathilda, future Paralympian. I want to hear more about that. But what are some of your ideas?
We're not there yet. We're not there yet, but trying very hard. So yeah, no, I'll do it quickly to benefit the people who live in Israel, me included. But I used to be a high school teacher, and I always used to say to my students, kind of Kita Yod upwards, which is like 14, I guess, 15 years old, that they can use Wikipedia, but use it more like a bus depot, in that they're kind of like, they can take the information there, but look at the sources and follow the sources. So if they're citing, for example, 5 different things, look at those, and if they're good, use those as your information, and make sure that you're using a plethora of different sources to inform what you're doing. So it's more like Wikipedia as a centralized thing rather than Wikipedia as the endpoint. And so I think if we educate people on how to use information and how to kind of filter through what's available, because there's so much available at a click of a button, that it is hard to know. You get information overload in terms of what to use, what not to use, and Wikipedia is easy. It's the first thing on Google, so of course you're going to use it. But I recommend, if people are going to use Wikipedia, to use it as kind of like a starting point, and then to follow it outwards, and to use the things that it sources, if anything, to check if they're valid, to kind of criticize all information, and come to their own conclusions.
That's a great idea. Let me second that.
Yeah, go ahead. Second that, and you can go ahead next and give us your idea. It reminds me a little bit of how my teachers used to tell me that they were okay with me looking at Cliff Notes after reading novels. We're okay.
I'm not okay with Cliff Notes.
You might not have been okay with it, but I had teachers who told me in a very similar way, you can use this, but it's not a crutch. It's just a starting point, and I want to see you expand from there. That's how I was thinking of it from there. But go ahead, Mr. Swindle.
Well, yeah, that's probably the best idea that I've heard, or that just training the young people of what Wikipedia is, how it's useful, how it's not useful. That's going to be a key thing. But yeah, I've been the kind of prophet of doom on here of, we can't really fix Wikipedia that well, and it's going to get worse as anti-Semitism increases. The note of optimism that I have, though, I believe it was Christian that mentioned LLMs, ChatGPT. I think that's really going to be the key thing that ultimately displaces Wikipedia. Yes, there's some points that have been made that, yeah, Wikipedia does go in and inform that, but there's so many other sources too that LLMs are going to be using. I think people are, I mean, I've already drifted in this direction. I don't know how many the rest of you are, that now you can put it on your browser, that instead of the default search being Google, your default search is ChatGPT. I think that's really going to be the key thing, because we got to remember Wikipedia is old technology. These wikis were created like more than 20 years ago, whereas the cutting edge thing now is LLMs. I think people are just simply going to enjoy getting, asking their question, having it answered in the style that they like. Sometimes I tell mine to write like Virginia Woolf, in my answers. I think other people can be more creative than that, but so technology is ultimately going to be the solution to this problem.
Thank you. And since you brought in LLMs and Christian, why don't you piggyback off of that?
Well, sure. I'll just echo what both of the Davids said. The information landscape is changing, and AI is ultimately, over the next handful of years, going to a very large degree displace what we're seeing today. So yeah, I mean, focusing on AI, I think, is definitely the winning strategy, not just because it's emerging as more valuable and successful in search, but also because the players in this space are more approachable, right? They're not as firmly entrenched. It's much easier at this point to make changes, and there is an opportunity to exert influence in that direction. I mean, I'll give you two examples. The first is you have these Chinese companies that are they're producing LLMs that they're open sourcing completely. So in other words, not just the LLM product itself, but also all of the weights underneath it, which means you can take it and recreate it and potentially modify it, right? So it would be entirely possible without too huge a budget to take something like an R2 and make your own version of it that it removes some of this bias. And then the other element that I'll bring up is Grok, right? So a lot of these political conversations are happening on Twitter, and Grok is integrated with Twitter. So if you can exert some influence on Elon Musk and change the data that he uses to build Grok, then you can effectively displace Wikipedia from one of the leading LLMs that has a built-in distribution channel to a lot of the people who are kind of leading the charge on political conversations, at least in the United States. And that's the way that I would look at it.
Love it. I appreciate it. You're somebody who doesn't chime in much, but when you speak, I have to say you have a very good you could be giving speeches very well. You have a very trustworthy voice that makes me believe every word you say, even though they're all lies.
You know it.
And going from you, let's go.
Editors. The solution for Wikipedia editors is to have them do it via audio with trustworthy voices, and all's fine.
Yes, exactly. Except I'm sure AI would be able to come up with some of those voices too, and we wouldn't know the difference. Betty, who works with Christian, I would like you to please give us your final hopeful words. If they exist.
Justapedia, that's the hope. Wikipedia is not going to change. They're a political weapon. That's the way it is. Our editors are using AI to help fix the articles, but you still have to have the source. And that's the problem. Wikipedia is in a position where they're changing history, and there have to be alternatives. And that's what we're doing is facing them head on. And teaching, I guess, who was it that was saying we need to teach our upcoming editors, journalists, that they've gone completely off the rails. They're opinion journalists now. When I was doing CNN headline news, we were a lot more unbiased, and we covered all of the story. So what we're doing is preserving true history. And it's not something that's immediate. AI search engines are the jack in the box of information. And be it reliable or not, it's gone. You get it and it's gone. So when kids are doing research, when they're in school, you've got to have something that they can refer back to, read, find other sources. And that's what these encyclopedias are doing. So that's the good part about Wikipedia, and why I still edit there on occasion. But the focus is
interesting. That was a heck of a twist. I didn't know you still edited over there.
I still not politics,
Right? No, I get it.
Yeah.
That was an interesting twist. That was a little bit of Sixth Sense vibes over there at the end of this conversation. Yeah, he's been dead the whole time. Moving,
just ruined the movie for people who haven't seen it.
I did. Now let's go from the one of the grand dames of Wikipedia entry of Betty back to an even older school one of Jonathan Weiss. Give us your words of wisdom as you to mostly talk about sports.
Yeah, well, the whatever's good or bad about Wikipedia is a product of the people who are on there editing it. So if you're going to fix it, you probably need some new people, and this is what David Weissman said. So I mean, it's difficult to recruit people who want to, invest any kind of substantial amount of time, even if it's just, an hour a week. That's still a big time commitment for the average person. But if you yourself feel yourself are pretty neutral, or middle of the road person, sensible when it comes to politics, or know people, if we can recruit more of those kinds of people and get them involved, that would fix some of the problems. I mean, you're not going to be able to fix the sourcing problem until you change consensus, and you need people for the consensus. So, and then in terms of outside, to the extent that the Wikimedia Foundation itself is a problem, and it's somewhat paradoxical given that I donate so much of my time to Wikipedia, but I always tell people, do not donate money to the Wikipedia Foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation. They have something like an operating budget of over $100 million a year now, close to 200 million. And I think it only costs like $2 or $3 million a year to actually keep the servers running. So all that other money is going to all kinds of other, probably, development efforts, and, they're taking the donations to get more donations. And then also, different advocacy movements. Some of them we may all like, having more coverage of undercover things, like undercovered subjects like biographies of women. But there's the same opportunity there for promoting the same kind of political problems that we've been talking about. So I would say, see if you can find people who want to donate their time, but do not give your money to the Wikimedia Foundation.
Which is fittingly how we started this whole conversation, with somebody who was telling them exactly why she's telling them to take their money and shove it. But Yfat, who I know there were plenty of things about AI we wanted to talk to that we barely scratched the surface on. What are your final thoughts?
Well, I think I just mentioned the two big ticket items for me along the way, so I'll mention them very short. One is accountability, platform accountability. Put Wikimedia accountable for what they say they are, and make sure they enforce their rules and policies, and that they investigate what is being flagged to them quickly and properly. So that's one, and I think that's across any platform that we use, we should demand accountability on that. And the other is digital literacy. It connects to what Mathilda said, and I mentioned this before, right? Teach people what Wikipedia is, how to find resources, how to find information, how to question what you read, etc. So really teach people from youngest to oldest how to be more literate when they use social media and look for information.
Thank you. And Dr. Shlomit, minus the cat.
Yeah, you scared him away. So I would say that like years ago when I was teenager and people were talking about, school, friends, teachers, and, coaches about the possibility that the Holocaust will return. And it seemed to me, the more I thought about it, like an impossibility. It didn't make sense at all how it can happen. And we're living in a day and age where like we're seeing hate increase. We see people become stupider and like supporting Hamas, intelligent people, college, educated people, professors. And we see people who are extremely brainwashed by ideas and theories that are not reflecting reality as it is. So we are in a very, very dangerous times where people are supporting a totalitarian regime, as Hamas is a very dangerous totalitarian regime. And people, I'm a peace activist. I have a lot of Palestinian friends. I myself, years ago, I was on Al Jazeera. And the idea is many of Israelis want to have peace with Palestinians, see them as their equal, thinks about. But what happens with all these lies is not that it promotes any solution. It does not promote us towards peace. It is extremely, extremely dangerous. And the more we promote lies and misinformation, it's like we are walking on a floor that cannot hold us. We are building a house without real foundation, and it's a really dire state to the human race, in my view. So where is the hope, you ask? I think the hope lies in, first, if we look at history, we saw how the Jewish people prevails and really prevailed through history. The whole notion of Judaism I think it's a notion of hope. It's a notion of tikkun olam. It's a notion that life has a purpose and that we are all of us, wherever we are, part of a bigger picture. And that basic idea is an idea of hope, an idea that truth is can save all of us, whether we're Palestinian or Israelis, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, all of us. So I think that we saw, like you would think that evil would prevail. You would think that evil would prevail because you look at history and you see all the horrible, horrible things that happen through time. But in the end, goodness prevails. So I think I really want to thank each and every one of you, and I thank you for like having the opportunity to all of us gather together and talk about it, about the importance of neutrality, about the importance of sound knowledge, about sound facts, and the way to get there. And I think anyone who is somewhat enlightened has to realize that all this lying, whether on Arabic Wikipedia or English or Spanish, doesn't help anyone. It endangers the people who pursue these lies, and it endangers all of us. So it's our duty to really do whatever we can to have accurate sources, to have accurate places. And Justapedia is a real hope as well. And I'm really voting for Justapedia to become more known. And if Wikipedia will continue to go in this road it's going towards doom, then there's Justapedia. There's always hope.
Wonderful, lovely, it's a lovely note for you to finish on. Not just giving hope and faith, but actually lifting other people within the chat, because that's what it's about. It's all about taking care of each other. We're still individuals. And finally, last but certainly not least, I have my buddy Aaron Bandler, who's the reason that I made this and who connected me to almost all of you individually. Aaron, what are your wrap-up thoughts?
So I think that there needs to be sort of a micro and macro approach in terms of how to deal with Wikipedia. I think in the micro, there should be a push for certain reforms on the site. Like one interesting idea I've heard is that there should be paid admins. Because right now, we have a bunch of volunteer admins trying to enforce like vaguely worded policies You know, and there's no official rule book on how to be an admin. It's all at your discretion, you know. And so it makes it difficult to deal with nefarious actors who are gaming the system and manipulating the rules. So paid admins, I think, is an interesting idea to maybe try and sort of like, you know, cut down the bias. And I think also, as has been said, you know, Wikipedia could only work when there are enough editors who are truly committed to upholding the site's principles. So if more people are encouraged to edit Wikipedia, really learn, understand, you know, how the site's processes work and are committed to making it neutral, then maybe the consensus will change. And Wikipedia does say a consensus can change. If there are no editors dedicated to making that happen, then maybe there actually can be change on the site. I think also part of the micro, just writing about it and raising attention to it, like I and others here have, you know, help people understand how it works and how it's been bastardized by bad people. You know, that will help people see Wikipedia differently, help move the conversation forward. In the macro, at the end of the day, the only reason why Wikipedia is even relevant is because of Google. You know, and there's a whole Wikipedia article dedicated to the relationship between Google and Wikipedia. Until that changes, nothing really will change in the long run. And so people over here talk about legal strategy, you know, withholding money and so forth. I think the way forward is actually congressional investigations. You know, I mean, they have subpoena power. You know, maybe they can amass these people, have them, you know, hold them accountable for some of these biased edits. Look, and right now, like, we know Elon Musk is tweeting about Wikipedia and how it's biased. We know Elon has the president's ear. You know, the political climate, as it stands right now, I think is perfect to talk about Wikipedia. So let's move the conversation forward, you know, and get the attention of Congress, you know, and the federal government to look more into this. I think that's really how things can truly change, because we saw this with the campuses. You know, it's once these university presidents were pulled before Congress, had to justify, you know, not going after these anti-Semitic student groups on campus. You know, that's when things started to change. And so I think with Wikipedia, there could be a similar approach.
I think that's
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said something, because this whole time, sort of the elephant in my room of my head has been thinking of the college campus protests and all the Shabbos Kestenbaums of the world that are going and testifying, and thinking about Unrun, thinking about the, you know, the Hillel Neuyers, not that there's a lot of Hillel Neuyers of the world, going and trying to fix things like that. At the end of the day, if we have the right people carrying on top, I think that enough noise from people like all of you, writing good articles, giving good speeches, writing good tweets, using all of the forms of media and social media, and putting and synthesizing it together, and hopefully we could even get people on top to make a little bit of noise and look into it. Maybe some changes can happen, but in the meantime, I like the tangible ideas you are all having, which includes for people to just critically think and to know their sources, to not rely on Wikipedia as the be-all and end-all, because it certainly should be far from it. People should be using a synthesis of all of their sources, including AI, including all of these things. Nobody's going to stop using Google entirely, but people need to start realizing that Google is not going to solve everything for them all the time, and many people use it as a crutch, quite obviously. And then hopefully we can elevate, as Shlomit said, hopefully we can start elevate, you know, Justapedia and other things out there that are actually doing good, unbiased work. You know, this is a very perfect subject for my show, because the entire purpose of this show is supposed to be about people breaking out of their echo chambers. People say to me all the time, "Oh, your show's about anti-Semitism?" I'm like, no, it's often the subject. Your show is often about Israel. I was like, it's often the subject. That's not what it's about. Is it about medicine? I'm a nurse. I just had an organ donation episode. I said, that's often the subject, but it misses the point. The show is not about anti-Semitism or about Zionism or about health. The show is about trying to get away from the everybody's pinned against each other on the left and right and nobody listens to anything outside of their little bubble. The entire point of this is to have conversations about things as important as Wikipedia or as unimportant as sports, which still matter to plenty of people like me, and to just have these nice conversations where, guess what? There's people on the left and the right having civil discourse, talking to each other, opening their ears and listening to each other. Because to me, what the connecting thread is that's bringing society down during COVID and during presidential elections and before and after and since is all about people no longer critically thinking and only listening to each to their own. So I love this topic because what is Wikipedia supposed to be? It's supposed to be exactly what this show is. It's supposed to be people on both sides talking with no echo chambers. But as we can all agree, that's not what it's actually evolved into. And so Wikipedia, I think we can agree, is theoretically the perfect information model, but in actuality is extremely fatally flawed, extremely. And now it's all a matter of all of us on this chat and everybody watching finding our own techniques, using our own skill sets, whether it's as somebody who knows how to write well, or whether it's somebody who has a lot of friends and they can do phone trees, or whether or not it's somebody who's connected to politicians. Whatever people's skill sets are, is just to create awareness of what Wikipedia actually, unfortunately, is. Thank you all very, very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much.
Thank you, Boaz, for
Boaz.
getting this
Take
all
care,
together,
everyone.
man.
My pleasure.
Well, thank
Let's
you,
stay
everyone,
in
for
touch.
joining.
Bye.
Thank
This
you
was
all.
Bye, everyone.
wonderful. Thank you
Get some
all.
sleep. Those of you in
Take
Israel,
care.
go get some sleep.
Good to see everybody. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Bye.
Yeah.
Good to
Be
see you all.
safe.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Chosen Links. If you like what you heard, feel free to share this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our socials at Boaz Hepner on X and Facebook and at Hepner.Boaz on Instagram.